Chapter 1188. Pooh! Sure Wuchen's face was ashen as he spat out a mouthful of blood. He could feel that his sword heart, that had been cultivated to the point of being translucent like glass, had shattered and ceased to exist. But at the same time, he felt a sense of joy as if he had been reborn. The sword in his hand seemed to be filled with warmth at this moment, trembling slightly in his hand. Sure Wuchen looked at his sword with a pale face and murmured, "Do you think that I'm doing the right thing?" He laughed and suddenly said loudly, "Regardless of whether this is right or wrong, even if it is wrong, I will not regret it." It was on this day that the residents of 9 Supreme 2nd Supreme, revered Sword Sure Wuchen, destroyed his own sword heart and sword Tao, cultivating the path of swordsmanship, and creating a new guardian sword Tao. And it was from this very day onwards that the Xianhuang world gained yet another Grandmaster level being in the truest sense of the word. Carrying on from the past, the Xianhuang world created a new saying for the sword Tao. Sure Wuchen. All along, the Tao of the sword had been the main path of cultivation in the entire Xianhuang world. It was an eternal theme. Sword Tao was merciless, heartless swordsman. This was a fact that was universally acknowledged. Very few people questioned the truth of this point. Even though there were far, far too many outstanding geniuses and prodigies of the sword, who were unable to continue on this mainstream Grand Tao and died prematurely on it, there were still even more who advanced wave after wave without wavering in their determination. Even if he walked to the end and paid so much on the path of the sword, it was still difficult to reach the true path. In the end, he became a sword demon, a sword fanatic, but his infatuation did not change, and he did not regret becoming a sword demon. He only cared about the sword Tao, and he was stubborn. Outsiders might sigh at the fate of these people, but they would never doubt the sword Tao they pursued, especially the sacrifices and efforts they made for the sword Tao. Those were all things that could not be erased. Initially, Sure Wuchen was like that as well. He had no other choice but to give his entire heart and soul to his sword. He was infatuated with the sword, devoted to the sword, and treated the sword as his master. Everything in the world, everything in this world was under the sword. It was as if other than the sword, there was nothing else. It was because of this infatuation, this sincerity, and this stubbornness that Sure Wuchen had gradually grasped the pinnacle of swordsmanship. However, after he had gotten started and walked for a period of time, he discovered the flaw of this path. If he continued like this, he would continue to grow stronger. Regardless of whether it was his cultivation or battle prowess, his heart would also become cold and hard. Until his heart became as cold as iron, his entire person would be refined into a sword, emotionless, without love, and without righteousness. Well, to put it more accurately, there was no longer any warmth in his heart. In other words, there was nothing else in his heart other than his sword. If it had been the Sure Wuchen of the past, he would not have hesitated at all. So what if he was heartless and heartless? It did not matter. In this world, there was nothing worth worrying about. But now, Sure Wuchen realized that he couldn't bear to let it go, and couldn't ignore it. My whole group of brothers, my whole group of disciples. As the number 2 figure of a super sect, I've been alone for half my life. I've finally obtained everything that I've dreamed of the most, and now I'm supposed to give it all up? Time. As of he of. Because of this mentality, after weighing the pros and cons, Sure Wuchen resolutely gave up on the path of emotionless swordsmanship that he was halfway through. He was afraid. He was afraid that he would lose the things that he had worked so hard to obtain. He did not want to lose these things that he had once thought he would never be able to obtain. Swordsmanship is all-encompassing. I was able to walk this path of emotionlessness back then. Now, it's not impossible for me to walk another path of affection. Even if there is no path ahead, and it's rugged and difficult to walk, I will forge my own path. My path will no longer be the path of emotionless swordsmanship, but the path of the sword of protection. Sure Wuchen brought his disciple along on the journey back. He had been gravely injured along the way, and his cultivation base had been reduced to less than a tenth of what it was. But his heart was inexplicably relaxed and unburdened. It was as if the cultivation base that he had crippled was not that important. At least, it was not as important as the sense of relief that came from his heart. Shi Wuchen could even feel that there was a sword hum ringing in his dantian. When Yun Yang returned, it was the second day of Shi Wuchen's closed-door cultivation, and he had passed by him perfectly. In spite of this, Yun Yang's first reaction when he found out about the incident was, "Great." This time, Shi Wuchen was the one who had comprehended it. No matter how far Shi Wuchen could go in the future, at least Yun Yang felt an unusual warmth in his heart right now. Shi Wuchen had finally made a choice between his ability and his family. Not to mention anything else. Just this choice alone made it worthwhile for the brothers to gather in the mortal world and get along with each other. Just as Yun Yang arrived at the residence of 9 Supremes and took a quick glance around, he immediately noticed that the place had undergone a drastic change once again. There was almost no one in the residence as far as his eyes could see. In spite of this, the few fields were filled to the brim with people. Sensing the aura, Ping Xiaoyi and Guanuanying, the 2 permanent members who had stayed behind, rushed over at once. "Boss, it's time to consider recruiting more disciples," Ping Xiaoyi said with an excited smile. The residence of 9 Supremes had grown from nothing to the scale it was today. Ping Xiaoyi felt that he now had a goal in life, especially when he saw so many genius disciples emerging from the ranks of the disciples. Ping Xiaoyi felt that the vitality was boundless, and that there was much to be done. His home was getting better, and his days were getting better. The sense of accomplishment was naturally growing with each passing day. It's time to start recruiting new disciples. Yun Yang mused and said, "Each peak can take in 50 true disciples, 200 inner disciples, and 500 outer disciples, according to the peak's actual situation. The rest can be considered as menial disciples." "Do we need to divide them into generations of disciples?" asked Guanuanyang. "There's no need. This batch of disciples will still be the residents of 9 Supremes' first-generation disciples. But there's a time limit for teaching and answering questions. It can't be compared to direct disciples. The outer disciples, after that, can be taught by seed disciples and true disciples on behalf of their masters." Ping Xiaoyi and Guanuanying agreed to it one after another. The matter was settled. "Next, it's your turn to recruit more disciples. The basic scale will be the same as ours. On this basis, you can give guidance as you wish if there's anyone that catches your eye." Yun Yang rolled his eyes. "Both of you are no different from Shi Wuchen and the rest to me. It's the same for the residents of 9 Supremes as well. Therefore, your disciples will have to go through the assessment and participate in the martial contest. The entire sect will be the same. There will be no exceptions. If this assignment had been given to other sects, even if the person involved didn't show it on the surface, he would definitely be overjoyed. This was a transfer of great authority, but when Guoping heard this, their expressions turned bitter. "Boss, what we specialize in isn't the same as what you do. It's fine for us to give a few pointers, but when it comes to focusing on teaching disciples, this..." Firstly, the 2 of them specialized in different areas, and secondly, they were equally lazy. For the sake of freedom, to not care about anything, they did not even fight for the position of the 9 peak masters. They had always been lazing around, so their instinctive reaction was to push the responsibility away when Yun Yang suddenly pinned it on them. "I don't care about that. It's not the main point. You're all from the 10 finest talents, you can't be biased. It's your business to be at the bottom every day anyway. I'll just take it as watching." With a wave of his hand, Yun Yang had settled the matter with a single blow. Both of them were dumbfounded. "It's true that it's our business to be at the bottom every day, but we want our pride as well. We can't afford to be embarrassed like this. You can say whatever you want, but are we going to wash our faces with tears every day? Has there been any change in our sect during this period of time? Has there been any unforeseen events?" Yun Yang walked in as he spoke. "There have been a lot of changes, a lot more," Guanuanying introduced with a smile. "Ever since that day when the middle-class celestial luck banner suddenly flew over." After the detailed introduction, he continued, "Jiang Luoluo and her master, Gan Tianyan, are still guests in our residence. Boss, you don't know that Senior Gan is rather jealous. From what I see, she can't wait to take all of our disciples away. It's a pity that none of them are willing to go with her." "Is that so?" Yin Yang's eyes shone. As he spoke, Two slender silhouettes were already approaching him. It was Gan Tianyin and Jiang Luoluo. Sect leader Yin is finally back. Since we parted that day, your demeanor seems to have grown even more, and your cultivation base has improved. Congratulations, congratulations. Gan Tianyin had long sensed Yun Yang's return, and had been itching to come and talk to Yun Yang about his disciples. But it was only right to let Yun Yang understand his sect's situation first. Therefore, he had been holding it in until now, and had only come when he could no longer hold it in. Once he saw Yun Yang, he was shocked. It had only been a short period of time since they parted, but Yun Yang's cultivation base had improved tremendously. The phrase 1,000 miles in a day was not enough to describe the progress of his cultivation base. It was terrifying. Senior, you're the one who's shining. Yun Yang laughed. Sect leader Yin, this old one has come to discuss something with you. Gan Tianyin had been holding back his words for more than a month. Now that he had finally met the highest authority of the residents of 9 Supremes, how could he hold it in any longer? He spoke his mind, and went straight to the topic. Then senior, please. Let's talk as we walk. Yin Yang walked towards his main hall. Regarding your residence's disciples, sect leader Yin, what do you plan to do? Gan Tianyin went straight to the point. Your residence has more than 14,000 disciples. Sect leader Yin, forgive this old one for being disrespectful, but it's obviously far from enough to train so many disciples with just the manpower of your residence's upper echelon. Yin Yang nodded. Senior is frank. This is indeed my residence's current biggest shortcoming. Gan Tianyin smiled and said, since sect leader Yin doesn't deny it, I'll say one more thing. Your residence's disciples are all outstanding and gifted. If they can't receive the appropriate guidance because of this, it's a waste of God's gift, and a pearl covered in dust. Yin Yang smiled faintly and said calmly, it's indeed a bit of a pity. I wonder what senior can teach me. Gan Tianyin said with a face full of pity, sect leader Yin, please don't blame this old one for talking too much. It's true that many of your residence's disciples are talented and beautiful. It's definitely not enough to rely on the 9 supreme elders of the residence of 9 supremes. It's bound to cause many disciples to be unable to receive teachings that match their talents. It's a waste of time. Sect leader, you're also an expert in cultivation. You should know that once you miss these few years of foundation building, in the future. Yin Yang chuckled. Senior, please speak your mind. I won't be offended. Gan Tianyin smiled and said, sect leader Yin, you're a straightforward person, so I won't beat around the bush. This is my plan. Since it's difficult for your residents to train so many disciples, I wonder if you can allocate some of them to the Phoenix Cry sect? Yin Yang thought about it and said faintly, in terms of principle, no sect will give away the disciples that they've already recruited. At least, the residents of 9 Supremes' disciples are not allowed to leave. The reason why we've trained dozens of them first is not only to train them, but also to save them. When the time is right, these disciples who have entered the sect earlier can be taught on behalf of their masters. Now there are already 60 to 70 disciples who can fulfill this duty. As for the new disciples that we're going to recruit, although there are thousands of them, if they're spread out, there'll only be dozens of them for each of the first-generation disciples. As long as they're diligent, one person can manage and teach 60 to 70 people, or even 100 people. Even if mistakes are inevitable, it won't be a big problem. The foundation stage is important, but as long as the theory is explained clearly and the resources allocated can keep up, there'll be opportunities for improvement with individual effort. They don't necessarily need the guidance of famous teachers or the teachings of experts, because the cultivation method of a sect is the same. Yin Yang smiled calmly. Gan Tianyin was a little dumbfounded by Yin Yang's words. Indeed, Yin Yang's theory was feasible. Although the guidance and training of famous teachers were important, the training of the foundation stage was almost the same. For example, Gan Tianyin dared not say that he was much better than Yun Yang, Shi Wuchen, or even Yun Xiuxin. Instead, the resources allocated were the most important, and the residence of 9 Supremes was obviously more than enough. Moreover, Gan Tianyin had seen that these children of the residence of 9 Supremes did not need to be managed at all during this period of time. As long as they were given the cultivation method, every single one of them would be self-aware and self-reliant. They would eagerly and desperately cultivate, working hard to improve. There was no need for the so-called supervision at all. They cherished the cultivation opportunity. They had more than ordinary cultivators. In such an environment, the so-called training and cultivation really did not have much meaning. Among the 60 to 70 disciples, there would be an obvious competitive mechanism, each more hardworking and desperate than the other. If this went on, not only would it be feasible, it would be very feasible. Moreover, Yun Yang and the other higher-ups would be more relaxed because of this model. They would definitely be more relaxed than they were now. Thinking of this, Gan Tianyan could not help feeling a little lost. Before Yun Yang came back, Guan Nuanying and Ping Xiaoyi's explanation was already rather flexible. As long as the target disciples are willing, you can take as many as you can. Therefore, Gan Tianyan had high hopes for this conversation with Yun Yang. Who would have thought that Yun Yang's return would seal the last remaining gap? How could he explain this? Could his plan fall through just like that? Was it all for naught? Jiang Luoluo, who had been following them with her head lowered, had not spoken a word throughout the entire journey. Now, however, she almost burst out laughing, covering her mouth quickly as her eyes darted about. All the words that Gan Tianyan had prepared were swallowed back by Yun Yang's words. For a moment, she did not know what to say. She stammered, but. Chapter 1189. For a moment, Gan Tianyan was ashamed and angry from being fooled. She looked at Yun Yang speechless. Yun Yang said with a smile, "However, since Senior Gan has spoken, I have to give you face. Our families are in-laws, so of course we are different. As long as the goodies are kept within the family, it's fine." As his voice trailed off, Yun Yang fell into deep thought and did not speak for a long time. Gan Tianyan's eyes lit up. She knew that Yun Yang had relented not only because the matter had changed, but because it was definitely feasible. Yun Yang thought for a moment and said in a low voice, "We can do this. Senior is my sister-in-law's master. We are not outsiders, so of course we have to give you face. However, your sect and this residence are not the same sect after all. The residence of 9 Supremes has just been established, and there are many things waiting to be done. How about this? What do you think the Phoenix Cry sect has to exchange with us?" Exchange? Gan Tianyan's eyes widened. "Does this mean that you want me to buy it?" Yun Yang smiled amiably. "Senior, please don't misunderstand. This junior doesn't mean that, and I'm not a merchant. Isn't it cliché to use money with our relationship? What our sect needs is just a little bit of sincerity. Whether it's rare metals, treasures of heaven and earth, or cultivation methods and arcane manuals, all of these are fine. Your sect can do whatever you want." He smiled sheepishly and sighed again. "Your sect is one of the top 3 sects with middle-class celestial luck banners. Perhaps you look down on this junior's stinginess, but this is the current situation of our residence. We lack all of these things. Very much so." Gan Tianyan took a deep breath and swallowed it forcefully, saying, "We do have all of these." Yun Yang replied, "Your sect can do whatever you want, but it's just a little bit of sincerity." "Whatever? Sincerity?" Gan Tianyan was immediately annoyed. "Whatever? Can it really be whatever? If you're willing to give it to someone with just a little bit of sincerity, I'm afraid you'll have to find a better one." She lowered her head and thought for a while before saying, "I wonder how many disciples sect leader Yin can give? Our sect has been established for a long time. I'm confident that we have some resource reserves." Yun Yang chuckled and waved his hand in a forthright manner, saying, "Senior is a forthright man and straightforward. Including the top 10 disciples who are going to the flag, Senior only needs to call out to any of the disciples you fancy. Including the top 10 disciples who went to Celestial Luck Banner, Senior, feel free to call anyone you like. As long as they agree, we won't interfere. Even if Senior takes all the 14,000 disciples in our residence, I won't say anything." There were 2 words that almost slipped out of his mouth. F***CK. At the end of the day, the problem was back to square one. Voluntary. Moreover, before you came back, We didn't need to pay any price for this to be carried out. Now that you've come back, you've made a long speech, and you've even asked for this and that, and you've given me the same promise as before. Moreover, it's completely useless? Gan Tianyan stood up abruptly. His face was ashen as he gritted his teeth. Sect leader Yin, your generosity has really broadened my horizons. It's really eye-opening. Yun Yang said innocently. If Senior has any other thoughts, you can totally bring them up and say it in person. What's the harm in having an open and honest exchange? I've just returned to the residence. Perhaps there are some things that I'm not as familiar with as Senior. Gan Tianyin was furious, her chest rising and falling rapidly. Her emotions were on the verge of losing control. She suddenly recalled a junior sister in the sect who would mutter to herself through gritted teeth every time she was angry. So angry that my breasts hurt. Both of them hurt. Gan Tianyin, who used to be in a high position, and whose status was only below the sect leader, had never experienced such a thing. Today, however, she truly understood the profound meaning of this phrase. It turned out that both of them could really hurt from anger. The innocent expression on Yun Yang's face made Gan Tianyin feel like she was about to explode from anger. Gan Tianyin panted heavily for a moment before she said coldly, Sect leader Yin, you don't have to play dumb. Before you came back, I've already tried for a long time. Those who are willing to go with me are few and far between. If that's not the case, why would I need to trouble sect leader Yin? Gan Tianyin had no choice but to swallow her anger. It was because the current batch of disciples in Yun Yang's residence of 9 Supremes were too outstanding. They were too talented. As long as there was a chance, she would not let it go. Yin Yang coughed awkwardly. I see. Well, then he said with a troubled expression, Senior Gan, I can understand your feelings, but it's true that the residence of 9 Supremes has many disciples. And it's also true that the teachers are insufficient. These are all true. However, if the disciples are unwilling to leave but the sect orders them to leave, it'll be a huge blow to the disciples' state of mind. How much effort will it take to make up for it later? Are you willing to take this risk? Are you willing to bear the consequences? If you're really willing, I can reluctantly do it. Gan Tianyin was speechless for a long while after Yin Yang said that. What Yin Yang had said was true. If the disciples were unwilling to leave, could the residents of 9 Supremes still chase them away by force? Their hearts were divided. Based on the sense of belonging, the residents of 9 Supremes' disciples had to the residents of 9 Supremes. If such a situation were to happen, the expelled disciples' state of mind would definitely be hard to maintain. Disciples who lacked a state of mind would have limited achievements in the future, no matter how gifted they were. There was no room for nurturing such disciples. Furthermore, if the residents of 9 Supremes really did so, and did as the Phoenix Cry sect wanted, who else would be willing to join the residents of 9 Supremes in the future? Even the disciples could not be protected, and were taken away just like that. There was no sense of security at all. If there were any other ways, they would never be willing to join such a sect. Is there no one in your sect that is not very valued, even if it's a disciple who might be eliminated? Gan Tianyin was melancholy. Yin Yang rolled his eyes. Not very valued. Might be eliminated? The residents of 9 Supremes had such disciples. There were a lot of them, and they were everywhere. Currently, none of the residents of 9 Supremes' disciples received special attention. Everyone cultivated diligently on their own. It was precisely because of this that everyone's path was similar. At least, the starting point was the same, and there was no difference between them. Similarly, everyone's chances of being eliminated were the same. So everyone had the possibility of being eliminated. In other words, all the residents of 9 Supremes' disciples were not very valued, and all of them had the possibility of being eliminated. However, under the current spiritual chi of the residents of 9 Supremes, even the most useless of them could break through a few chakras. Moreover, these little fellows were all gifted. As long as they were given time, none of them would be useless. Under such a premise, as long as the person involved did not give up, it was not easy to figure out who would be eliminated in the end. Senior, you've been a guest in the residence of 9 Supremes for some time. I'm afraid you know more about the recent affairs of the residents of 9 Supremes than I do. Of course, you know the situation and mentality of these disciples better. Do you have to do that from us? Yin Yang rubbed the space between his brows, feeling a headache coming on. His meaning was clear. These are all our disciples. Do you Phoenix Christ sect have to take advantage of us? Do you have to bite a piece of meat? Can't we not bite? Hearing Yin Yang's words, Gan Tianyin was speechless, and his embarrassment was written all over his face. Yes, it was one thing that the residents of Nine Supremes did not have enough teachers, but why did they have to share their lack of teachers with their disciples? Moreover, there were many talented disciples. What kind of logic was this? Even if the Phoenix Christ sect was a prestigious sect, it could not be so overbearing. To put it more seriously, taking disciples by force was a serious matter of cutting off one's future and damaging one's foundation. No matter what, it was the Phoenix Christ sect's fault. However, Gan Tianyin was not reconciled to it. Under normal circumstances, the act of taking outstanding disciples by force was naturally not desirable. No matter how passionate one's thoughts were, few sects dared to take action. However, the residents of Nine Supremes had too many talented disciples, far exceeding the maximum training limit that the residents of Nine Supremes could currently train and cultivate. Moreover, Gan Tianyin did not intend to take those with the highest talent, which was why he had spoken. In fact, Gan Tianyin himself was puzzled. Where did the residents of Nine Supremes find so many talented disciples? The number of outstanding disciples in the residents of Nine Supremes was more than 14,000. Even if all the sects with celestial luck banners were included, the number would not be more than this. If he had not seen it with his own eyes, he would not have believed it. Over the years, the competition between the sects with celestial luck banners has become more intense. Disciples with good aptitude are as rare as phoenix feathers and unicorn horns. What's more, the reason why the sects with celestial luck banners have such abundant spiritual chi is not without a price. The price of gathering such a massive amount of spiritual chi is to transfer all the spiritual chi from the nearby mortal lands. The spiritual chi of heaven and earth is constant, and once the spiritual chi of a region is highly concentrated in one place, the spiritual chi in a certain range around it will inevitably die out. Similarly, the probability of geniuses appearing in the mortal world, where the spiritual chi is thinner. Gan Tianyin heaved a long sigh. Even if he did not take into account the fact that the spiritual chi was thin, the probability of geniuses appearing in the mortal world was still minuscule. Basically, there would only be one in a few million people. Otherwise, how could there be the term genius? In recent years, it has become more and more difficult for the sects to find their successors. When I came to the residence of Nine Supremes this time, I was surprised to see the gathering of geniuses, all of whom are talented. It's really difficult for me to suppress my desire to cherish talents, which is why I'm so bold to ask. Now that sect leader Yin has many concerns and the truth is that you are in a dilemma, I won't force you. After all, it's not necessary to divide the disciples if there are too many talented disciples in the sect to teach them all. Gan Tianyin's eyes were filled with sadness as she sighed. Yin Yang observed his expression and felt that it was about time. He smiled and said, "Senior, don't be anxious. We can discuss this matter at length." Gan Tianyin asked in surprise. "What else can we discuss at length?" Yin Yang said, "Phoenix Christ sect has resources and many cultivation seniors, but it doesn't have many disciples that can be taught. Perhaps, it should be said that the number of talented disciples is very limited, while the residence of Nine Supremes has many disciples that can be taught. Although it's difficult for our disciples to transfer to your sect, it's not impossible for us to compromise and try to cooperate. Perhaps we can both get what we want." Compromise? Cooperation? How do you say? The teachers in Phoenix Christ sect who have free time can come to the residence of Nine Supremes to teach disciples. They can also bring back the disciples they like to teach. The only restriction is that they have to wait until the residence of Nine Supremes has chosen their inner disciples. Gan Tianyin's expression turned cold. "Sect leader Yin, what a good plan. Is your so-called cooperation to let Phoenix Christ sect provide manpower and help the residents of Nine Supremes train their disciples in exchange for all the benefits? Yin Yang smiled and said, Senior, you are mistaken. The residents of Nine Supremes' disciples will retain their identity, but when they are successful in their studies, they will have a chance to choose which sect they will belong to in the future. Gan Tianyin was dumbfounded. In other words, when they are successful in their studies and choose to become Phoenix Cry sect's disciples, they will only be Phoenix Cry sect's disciples. Similarly, if they still choose to be residents of Nine Supremes' disciples, they will only be residents of Nine Supremes' disciples. Ping Xiaoyi and Guanuanyang, who stood beside him, did not say a word as Yin Yang finished his narration leisurely. Gan Tianyin snorted and said, What's the difference between this and before? If the disciples still choose to become disciples of the residents of Nine Supremes at that time, wouldn't all the efforts of the Phoenix Cry sect over the years be in vain? Well, to be more precise, it's all for the residents of Nine Supremes. Gan Tianyin was extremely fearful of this point. During this period of time, she had been troubled by the residents of Nine Supremes' disciples' sense of identity towards the residents of Nine Supremes itself. If there were truly people who wavered, they would not have waited until today. They would have left with their people long ago. Yin Yang said faintly, This collaboration is meant to give your sect a chance. If the master-disciple bond that has been cultivated over the years can't change a person's mind, shouldn't it be the teacher's own reflection? What Senior said just now is a possibility. Perhaps after many years, those disciples who have been nurtured will all choose to become disciples of Phoenix Cry sect to serve their master after they have grown up. Wouldn't that be a greater loss for the residents of Nine Supremes? There are pros and cons to this collaboration. Your sect has deployed a lot of manpower and resources, but in the process of cultivating these disciples, if they were in the residence of Nine Supremes, the spiritual chi and resources used for cultivation would all be provided by the residents of Nine Supremes. Now, Senior, do you still think that the residents of Nine Supremes would benefit from this collaboration? Gan Tianyin was stunned, lowering her head in thought. Yin Yang was right. It was impossible to erase the years of teacher-disciple relationship. If he was unable to influence the disciples' feelings, then it would really be the problem of the teacher. When the time came, it might be delusional to say that he could take all of them away, but it was still reasonable to take half of them away. Moreover, all the resources and spiritual chi of the venue would be provided by the residents of Nine Supremes. What she needed to contribute was only a few elites and a few cultivation methods. That was all. In this way, the situation was not only the residents of Nine Supremes getting all the benefits, it could almost be said that the Phoenix Cry sect was using the residents of Nine Supremes' resources to cultivate its own disciples. Don't forget, as long as the disciple cultivates our Phoenix Cry sect's cultivation method, he or she will use our Phoenix Cry sect's cultivation method when he or she attacks in the future. Isn't that the same as having the Phoenix Cry sect's imprint on their body? Gan Tianyin looked hesitant, but in fact, she had already agreed in her heart. She had even begun to plan who would come over in the future. She would not allow those who were not steady, hot-tempered, and those who were always weird. She would even skip those who were weak. She must choose those who were strong, absolutely reliable, and had a good temperament. After a while, Gan Tianyin said in a low voice, Sect leader Yun's proposal of cooperation is indeed worth discussing. However, this is a serious matter. I need to go back and discuss it with the sect leader and the few elders. Yin Yang laughed heartily and said, Of course. Of course. In fact, whether your sect agrees or not, it doesn't affect the relationship between our two sections. After all, with Luelua's sister-in-law here, the relationship between us is unbreakable. Gan Tianyin nodded slowly. Yin Yang's words were more realistic, but she still needed to go back and discuss the specific details. If she made a decision now, she would be suspected of overstepping her authority. Both parties exchanged a few more pleasantries. Gan Tianyin's emotions were getting more and more difficult to conceal. Soon, she bade farewell to Yin Yang and left the residence of Nine Supremes without stopping, returning to the Phoenix Cry sect in the night. It was more important to decide on this matter as soon as possible. Along the way, they chased after the clouds and broke through the fog, traveling at lightning speed. They traveled day and night in hopes of returning as soon as possible. Gan Tianyan pondered as she hurried back. There were a total of 17 to 18 saint kings, and 3 royal saints in the sect. There should be at least 7 to 8 of them, who could be sent out. 7 or 8 people. If each of them taught 30 disciples, then at least 200 disciples could be taught. As long as the master and the disciple got along well with each other, and the friendship was real, after a few years, when the disciple's body reached the initial level, wouldn't it mean that the Phoenix Cry sect suddenly had more than 200 talented disciples? As long as they had this foundation, it was not impossible for the Phoenix Cry sect to advance into the top 3 classes. It might even be possible for them to ascend to the palace level by then. One had to know that even a palace sect might not have 200 to 300 excellent disciples. Inside the residence of 9 supremes, Ping Xiaoyi and Guanuanying looked at Yun Yang and stuttered. Boss, what do you mean by this? Isn't it too risky? From their point of view, if the Phoenix Cry sect were to take in disciples here, even if the disciples who were trained would still bear the title of the residence of 9 supremes disciple for the time being, the situation would be very different after a few years. The gratitude of being a master was not just a saying, it was an emotion that could not be erased. If that was the case, it would be better to be poached away right now. If they were poached away now, the only thing that would be lost would be a few young fellows who had yet to grow up and were less determined. The loss would be negligible, but it would be a pity if they were poached away after they had grown up. It might even be a huge loss. Don't be so nervous. Yin Yang chuckled and comforted them. I've said it from the beginning. This is a collaboration. Of course there are pros and cons. Even if the Phoenix Cry sect really poached away a few hundred people, it's only a few hundred people. We still have more than 10,000 on our side. The ones we lose will only be a fraction. There's no need to worry too much. Ping Xiaoyi said, You're too optimistic. I'd better go and select the disciples quickly. I'll pick out those who are talented first. It's not advisable to sacrifice for others. How can you do that? Yun Yang said unhappily. Since we're planning to facilitate the collaboration, we should show our goodwill and sincerity. What's the point of them coming if we're only going to leave them some useless people? We should show the greatest sincerity to our brother sects who have established a friendly relationship. We should open our hearts and let them feel ashamed. Guanuanying was dumbfounded. Ping Xiaoyi was tongue-tied. Shuang had nothing to say. This sanctimonious and modest gentleman in front of us. Is he really our boss? Where was the sky that was once 9 feet high? Where was the promise of plucking the feathers of a swallow? How could it be like this? Yin Yang said righteously. My 2 brothers, one must be magnanimous as a person. Be magnanimous. Chapter 1190. Where is Instructor Dong now? Asked Yin Yang. They stopped talking about the Phoenix Cry sect. To Yin Yang, it was only a hypothesis. Whether it could succeed or not, it was all up to the heavens. The highest place, Guanuanying mumbled. He's sitting right under the Celestial Luck banner. Ever since the Celestial Luck banner flew here, the old man has been sitting under it and hasn't moved at all. I'll go talk to him. The older the wiser. It's rare to have something in common with you guys. Yin Yang stood up and left, leaving Guanuanying and Ping Xiaoyi, who were rolling their eyes in anger. Dong Qitian was sitting cross-legged under the residence of 9 Supreme's middle-class Celestial Luck banner, just as Guoping and Ping Xiaoyi had said, bathing in the howling spiritual qi that blew against his face. With a soft whooshing sound, 2 thick white mists suddenly sprayed out from his nostrils. They were like 2 long dragons that stretched for hundreds of feet. From head to tail, they were the same thickness, as if they were real. Not only did the 2 puffs of white air that seemed to have materialized come to an end, they hovered in the air for half a cup of tea's time, before Dong Qitian inhaled softly. The 2 puffs of white air connected at the farthest end, forming a large, enclosed semicircle that flew back at top speed. The white mist did not simply retract, but all the spiritual qi that the white mist touched, no less than 500 feet in radius, was swept back to Dong Qitian's nostrils with a whooshing sound. As Dong Qitian's inhalation and exhalation ended, a huge whirlpool appeared in the space where the white mist had been. It was an absolute vacuum that had appeared due to the rapid disappearance of spiritual qi. Spiritual qi surged in from all directions like a tsunami. In just a blink of an eye, the spiritual qi vacuum created by Dong Qitian's breathing of spiritual qi was filled to the brim. Old Dong was not bothered by the change. Only his flat stomach was slightly protruding, but with a shudder, his stomach deflated and returned to its original state. After about half a cup of tea's time, there was another whooshing sound as another 2 long dragons flew out. The interval between his inhalation and exhalation was about the time it took to brew a cup of tea, which was almost an hour. Yin Yang watched from the side and could not help feeling delighted, feeling that his horizons had been broadened. Dong Qitian's cultivation method was inconceivable, but the efficiency was equally inconceivable and appalling. As far as Yin Yang knew, anyone who cultivated and breathed would try their best to absorb the surrounding spiritual qi into their body, then refine it with the cultivation method they cultivated, and turn it into their own. There were very few who were greedy and impatient, blindly absorbing the spiritual qi like a whale swallowing the ocean. Dong Qitian's cultivation method, on the other hand, did not care how much spiritual qi there was around him. He absorbed it all in one fell swoop, before refining it fully and integrating it into his body. Such a method of forcefully seizing and absorbing spiritual energy was simply infuriating and deranged. Although Yin Yang was delighted, he did not disturb Dong Qitian. Instead, he chose to watch patiently. He wanted to see how Dong Qitian would proceed, and whether he would only be able to absorb the spiritual qi in front of him and not be able to take care of the other directions. Although the spiritual qi vacuum in front of him seemed to be filled up by the surging spiritual qi, it was only filled in terms of volume. The quality of the spiritual qi was far inferior to what it was before. The quality of the spiritual qi around Dong Qitian and behind him was no different from the wave of spiritual qi that he had absorbed earlier. Another breath passed. As if to prove Yin Yang's guess, there was another soft whooshing sound. When the 2 white dragons appeared again, they chose to spiral backward in a giant semicircle. Another 2 breaths later, the whooshing sound returned. After the buffer time of 3 cups of tea, the concentration of spiritual qi in the space in front of Dong Qitian was fully replenished. It was enough for him to whooshing out and gather a new wave of spiritual qi. Observing the cycle in detail, Yin Yang finally understood the situation. There was no need to absorb the spiritual qi around him anymore. The semicircle in front and the semicircle at the back had already absorbed the space around him, with little to no leakage. Other than the spiritual qi left for the disciples below, the rest of the spiritual qi was all occupied by Old Man Dong alone. He was fully utilized without any leakage. By the time Dong Qitian opened his eyes and ended this round of cultivation, it was already midnight. Yin Yang's gaze met Dong Qitian's. Just as he opened his eyes, he was shocked to realize that there seemed to be a galaxy shining in Dong Qitian's eyes. Even with Yin Yang's composure, he could not help but be mesmerized. At that moment, he felt as if his soul had wandered through the galaxy and was no longer himself. Yin Yang's heart was filled with terror. He quickly closed his eyes and paused for a moment before opening them again. Realizing that everything before him had returned to its original state, he could not help but break out in a cold sweat despite his relief. The legendary sight of a single glance was probably nothing more than this. It was truly frightening and appalling. Dong Qitian was still sitting where he was, watching Yin Yang quietly without moving. A warm smile bloomed on his face. "Young Yin, your cultivation base has improved greatly again. Such an improvement is truly remarkable." Yin Yang chuckled humorlessly. "You're flattering me, senior. This junior's improvement is far inferior to yours. It's not even enough to describe it as the difference between heaven and earth. It looks like, senior, you've broken through your previous realm again?" Dong Qitian smiled faintly and said, "It's just a coincidence." At this moment, Dong Qitian was calm and collected, even vaguely exuding an otherworldly aura. He was like a completely different person compared to before. He said softly, I'm not praising you casually when I say that your cultivation base is impressive, but I'm speaking from the bottom of my heart. There's a difference in our cultivation base. The total amount of heaven and earth spiritual chi that I can absorb in one breath is 1,000 times more than what you can absorb in one breath. Of course, my cultivation base is faster than yours. But at my cultivation level, the amount of spiritual chi accumulated between each level is also much more than yours. How can this be mentioned in the same breath? You're right, Senior. I understand this, of course. Thank you for your guidance, Senior. I heard your conversation with the little girl from the Phoenix Cry sect just now. You're not someone who's easy to talk to. I guess you're up to something again, aren't you? Dong Qitian turned to ask. This was the difference in status. Gan Tianyin was an old senior in the eyes of many martial artists in the Bound of Universe. She was far above everyone in the residence of 9 Supremes, including Yin Yang. However, she was still a little girl in Dong Qitian's mouth. Yin Yang sweated. What are you talking about, Senior? How could I be up to something? I've always been easy to talk to. Dong Qitian snorted and said, Easy to talk to? You brat, you think you're easy to talk to, but can you do it yourself? Or perhaps you've made another breakthrough in your ability to talk to me now. I've experienced it firsthand. I know that you've never done anything without benefits. You're a master who even Yin Guo wants. If you don't have a big scheme, how could you allow the Phoenix Cry sect to stay in the residence of 9 Supremes for a long time? You even opened a class to recruit disciples? You must be up to something. Am I right? Yin Yang defended himself. I really don't. I just think that what Senior Gan said makes sense. I want my disciples to be well too. Dong Qitian snorted, no longer bothering with him. He said casually, all right. I don't have the time to listen to your glib talk. Let's just say that you're selfless. Just tell me what you're here for. There's indeed something. Yin Yang flashed a cute smile. I'll need Elder Dong's help for this to happen. Just spit it out. Don't King beat around the bush. Yin Yang told him about the Lei family and said, according to that girl, her master is a Demon King Pinnacle expert. I'm worried that I can't handle it alone. It's just a Demon King, what pinnacle? Do you think people who cultivate to the pinnacle are so worthless? Dong Qitian's disdain towards Yin Yang's words was evident in his words, and did not bother to hide it. There's something else. Yin Yang then told him about Sacred Heart Palace's Zhan Wufei's mission, especially the suspicions related to Great Elder Lei Qianli. He said, I'm afraid that, if I were to stir up an immeasurable incident, how can I, a junior with small shoulders, be of any help? I really can't handle it. Zhan Wufei is still the hall master now, Dong Qitian murmured, a hint of nostalgia flashing in his eyes. His transcendental aura vanished at once, as if he had returned to the mortal realm. Yin Yang could not help being stunned. Zhan Wufei, how could he not be the hall master? Wait a moment. Perhaps there was something strange about this matter, but it could also be attributed to the lotus root. He remembered Feng Guohai mentioning that the battle between the 9 Lives Cat and Hall Master Hua had brought the Sacred Heart Palace's 30,000 years of peace. However, Bai Bingxian had said that the 9 Lives Cat had been imprisoned more than 1,000 years ago. The time span between this period of time seemed to be extremely different. 8,000 years and 30,000 years could not be mentioned in the same breath. Just what unforeseen event could have caused such a huge difference in time? If what Feng Guohai said was true, did that not mean that Zhan Wufei had already been the Sacred Heart Palace's hall master for 30,000 years? At least 20,000 years. Judging from his appearance, however, he did not look like a hall master at all. If this matter is really as you said, it's not a small matter. Dong Qitian sucked in a breath and mumbled to himself, deep in thought. All right, I'll go with you to take a look. Yin Yang felt his body lighten up when he achieved his goal. It should be enough to have an expert like Dong Qitian by his side, right? Senior Dong, this junior has always had a question in his heart. Who was the person who imprisoned you back then? Yin Yang asked. As he grew more familiar with the Bound of Universe, Yin Yang felt more and more that Dong Qitian was extraordinary. Yin Yang even felt that even Sacred Heart Palace's hall master Zhan Wufei, whom he had met before, might not be much stronger than Dong Qitian. However, Such an earth-shattering figure had been imprisoned in that cave for more than 4,000 years. In that case, just what level of cultivation did the person who imprisoned him have? What kind of peerless character could have such capabilities and methods? Dong Qitian shuddered violently and said angrily, "Why are you asking all this, child?" "Well," Yin Yang said doubtfully, "can't I even mention that person's name?" Can't. Dong Qitian shook his head repeatedly, his face turning pale. Perhaps it was because he was too terrified. Dong Qitian looked around instinctively, as if the person he was most afraid of could appear at any time. Leave some people behind to take on the responsibility of teaching the new disciples. Yes. What followed was to check on the specific progress of the disciples, set new cultivation goals, and even teach new combat skills and cultivation methods. In short, it was a series of trivial matters. Of course, there was also the matter of preparing to recruit new disciples. It was also at this time that Qian Duoduo, who was getting rounder and rounder, finally had his turn to speak. Feeling that his position was seriously threatened, the little fatty looked at Yun Yang with grievance and said, "Boss, you said, the major domo is the second person in our sect, and he controls everything in the sect." That tone, it was filled with hidden bitterness. Yun Yang coughed and said, "Everyone in the residence of 9 Supremes needs to fight for it with their own ability, fatty. As long as you can defeat Shi Wuchen, Luo Dajiang, and the others, you'll be the real second person. There's absolutely no doubt about this, but there's no possibility of trickery either. Ability is the absolute truth." Qian Duoduo looked pale. "This," Luo Dajiang said with a smile. "Duoduo, as long as your disciples can defeat my disciples, I don't mind giving up my position." Qian Duoduo's cheeks trembled. "Do you think it's possible? Nothing is impossible. Work hard, fatty." The demiurge Flawed 10 patted Qian Duoduo's chubby shoulders one after another and said, "You really should lose some weight, fatty." Qian Duoduo looked pale, and did not say a word for a long time. After giving his orders, Yin Yang murmured, "I wonder if the people from the Phoenix Cry sect will come. If they do, how long will it take for them to arrive?" After some thought, he began to make arrangements. He expanded the mountain guarding formation around the residence of 9 Supremes, and scattered a lot of ethereal amethysts to strengthen the formation's foundation. He also went to the residences of the disciples, and buried a few pieces of ethereal amethysts in the large squares. With this round of arrangements, the spiritual qi in the residence of 9 Supremes increased again. With money and resources, of course, one could be willful. Just wait. I hope you guys can come. On the other side, Gan Tianyin was travel-worn. After traveling day and night, she finally stepped into the gate of the Phoenix Cry sect. "Where's the sect leader?" "At the main peak." Before the person who answered could finish, Gan Tianyin was already nowhere to be seen. All that could be seen was a white line flying away from afar. "Sect leader, junior sister, I have something to discuss with you." Chapter 1191. Gan Tianyin's face was filled with impatience. Beads of sweat were dripping down her beautiful face. "What is it? Why are you so anxious?" Ping Jinyue was surprised. How many years had it been since her senior sister was so anxious? "It's like this." Gan Tianyin sat down and snatched the teapot from Ping Jinyue's hands at an extremely fast speed. She put it to her mouth and drank as she said, "This is what happened. Senior sister, you didn't see it, but there are over 10,000 disciples in the entire mountain, and each and every one of them is a genius." Ping Jinyue sat quietly and listened seriously. Her brows were slightly furrowed, and her expression was uncertain. She did not speak for a long time. "This is definitely an extremely rare opportunity for our sect. At least for me, I definitely cannot miss it." After Gan Tianyin finished speaking, she anxiously looked at her sect leader junior sister. "This matter, it's not like we can't do it." Ping Jinyue thought for a moment and said, "But this can only be decided after all the elders of our sect meet. If sect leader Yin doesn't mind, we can bring the higher-ups of our sect to pay a visit, and see how many people from the residence of 9 Supremes are willing to cultivate our sect's cultivation method. At the same time, We can also see if we approve of those disciples. After all, there is a limit to how many disciples we can take in. Gan Tianyin was taken aback when she heard this. She paused and blushed. Junior sister, what do you mean? Don't you believe my eyes? Let me tell you, the disciples of the residents of 9 Supremes are all talented and intelligent. Each of them is 1 in a million. Although they are not as good as the top 10 disciples who participated in the Battle of the Celestial Luck Banner, they are definitely top-notch. This is like a pie falling from the sky. Our sect is worried about the lack of successors, and it is difficult for us to have outstanding disciples to inherit our sect. I know how to arrange this, but this is only your side of the story. It cannot be taken into account. Gan Tianyin said anxiously. I'm telling the truth. Although it's shocking to say that the residence of 9 Supremes has tens of thousands of talented disciples, I've seen it with my own eyes. How can it be fake? Ping Zhanyue smiled. Senior Marshal sister, I'm naturally willing to believe what you said. But you also said that what you said was shocking. You saw it with your own eyes and felt that it could not be faked. But in the eyes of others, it was no different from a fantasy story, the ravings of an idiot. I will only ask senior sister one thing. If another person bluntly said that he had 100 disciples with exceptional aptitude under him, and wanted to give them all to the sect, would senior sister believe it? As the saying goes, seeing is believing. Only by letting others see it can this matter be true. Gan Tianyin pondered for a moment before nodding. That's true. If someone else were to keep talking about how many talented disciples they have, I wouldn't believe it either. Moreover, there's another question that we need to consider again and again. Senior sister has just said that all the disciples of the residents of 9 Supremes are extremely loyal to the residents of 9 Supremes. Senior sister has spent a long time, but has not recruited any of them. What if no one is willing to follow the Phoenix Cry sect after we've taught them for a few years? Wouldn't it be a waste of effort for the residents of 9 Supremes? We can't ignore this. We can't ignore it. Ping Zhanyue looked at Gan Tianyin with a playful smile on her face. Gan Tianyin was not offended. She chuckled and said, I raised this question directly to Yun Yang at that time. But what Yun Yang said is that the teacher-disciple relationship that has been cultivated for many years cannot change the mind of the person who is cultivating it. It seems that it is a matter for the teacher to reflect on himself, right? The premise of our cooperation is that in the next few years, the residents of 9 Supremes will only provide the relevant resources of clothing, food, housing, and transportation for the disciples, but will never impose any restrictions on the cultivation of the disciples. Will never impose any restrictions. Can it really be so? Ping Zhanyue looked thoughtful. She pondered for a moment and said, we still need to discuss it. If it's feasible, we'll leave as soon as possible. As soon as Ping Zhanyue's voice died away, she immediately asked solemnly, Senior sister, are you really sure that the residence of 9 Supremes has so many disciples with aptitude close to that of Yun Xiuxin and Bai Yexing? During the Celestial Luck Banner battle, Ping Zhanyue had a deep impression of the top 10 disciples of the residents of 9 Supremes. Yes, Gan Tianyin said seriously, not only are there many of them, but they even have more room for growth than them. Many of the disciples are very young, only 6 or 7 years old. You should know what this means. Young age meant strong plasticity, and the age of 6 or 7 years old was the best time for a cultivator to build his or her foundation. Sigh. I keep feeling that this is strange, and that there's something fishy about it. Usually, when something good falls from the sky, the gains outweigh the losses, and the losses outweigh the gains. Ping Zhanyue fell into deep thought again. I don't think there will be any loss. Gan Tianyin smiled and said, Senior sister, think about it carefully. Even if the disciples we cultivate with manpower and time may not be on our side, their cultivation base will still belong to Phoenix Cry sect. This is equivalent to leaving a mark on those disciples, and the friendship between master and disciple is built in the process of teaching and solving doubts. I don't believe that no one will go with us in the end. Just like Luoluo. Although most of her heart is on Luo Dajiang, there is still some part of her heart on me. As long as I don't go against Luo Dajiang, Luo will definitely stand on my side and think for my sake. Don't you think so, senior sister? Ping Junhua chuckled and said, Junior sister, why do I hear that you seem to have lost your confidence? You are the mother-in-law. As long as you say it, would Luo Dajiang and Jiang Luoluo dare to say no? Gan Tianyan was slightly embarrassed and said slowly, Senior sister, I'm talking to you seriously, but you're mocking me. It has always been like this since the beginning of time. Even if the residents of Nine Supremes has ulterior motives and other schemes, with their current strength, they are still much weaker than Phoenix Cry sect. Even if there is discord and conflict between us, with the manpower we have in their base, do we have to be afraid that they will turn the sky upside down? Ping Junhua's eyes lit up and she said, That makes sense. Then this matter? Ping Junhua quickly made a decision. Summon the higher-ups for a meeting immediately, and make a decision as soon as possible. Hearing Ping Junhua's decision, Gan Tianyan went out impatiently to inform the higher-ups. Ping Junhua was left alone in the hall. She frowned and murmured, What is Yin Yang's intention in doing this? He could have just rejected it and pushed senior sister out of the door with just a word. But he made such a decision. This is very unexpected. It's also unusual. No sect would do this, but Yin Yang did it. As she thought about it, a thought suddenly rose in Ping Junhua's mind. She murmured, Could Yin Yang be? Impossible. How could a mere resident of Nine Supremes have such a huge appetite? Then, she put away her thoughts and smiled. Let me meet this sect leader Yin. Not long after, the meeting of the Phoenix Cry sect's higher-ups began. 24 higher-ups sat together, and most of them expressed doubt about Gan Tianyan's words. 10,000 geniuses. Ha ha ha. How is this possible? Even if the residents of Nine Supremes had 10 first-generation disciples in the Battle of the Celestial Luck Banner, and each of them is outstanding, you're saying that there are more than 10,000 geniuses with the same aptitude. This is ridiculous. Senior sister, you must be joking, aren't you? Junior sister, you must be seeing things. Either there's something wrong with your eyes. Anyway, I don't believe it. Hee, maybe junior sister Gan had a dream. But the dream was so wonderful that it extended to this moment. Gan Tianyan blushed. Let's not talk too much. Seeing is believing. Anyway, we are not separated by a few days. Everyone follow me to take a look. Let's see if there is something wrong with my eyes. But there's one thing we have to agree on in advance. This incident is a great opportunity for our sect. If it's not true, then I'm the one who deceived you. And I'll bow and apologize to all of you in front of the whole sect. But if it's true, then I've done a great service to the sect. I don't want any other benefits. I just want all of you to bow and thank me together and say, I shouldn't have doubted Elder Gan's discerning eyes. How about it? Do you dare? Ha ha ha. Junior sister, are you angry? Let's do it, let's do it. Let's go and take a look. I'd like to see how rare it is for a sect to have more than 10,000 genius disciples all of a sudden. Ha ha ha. Even the East Celestial Palace has so many genius disciples now? Ha ha ha. But then again, if it's true, it's nothing for us to bow and thank you in front of everyone. It's indeed a great opportunity for our sect if it's true. Why doesn't it deserve a word of thanks and praise from all of us? Let's go. Let's go together. What you hear is false, and what you see is true. Gan Tianyan flew up angrily. Everyone follow me. Follow me. Before her voice died away, she had already turned into a stream of light and sped away. Ping Junhua shook her head helplessly and said softly, You've really made me angry this time. Let's go, let's all go and take a look. To be honest, I also want to see whether this is true or not, whether it's a great opportunity or a great lie. Then, the 24 top experts of the Phoenix Cry sect turned into light and sped away. They sped toward the residents of Nine Supremes like the wind and lightning. At this time, the top 10 disciples of the residents of Nine Supremes, including Yin Xiuxin, had all returned. This time, Yin Yang adopted a new method. All the inner sect disciples gathered together, including the 9 peak masters. Then he asked the top 10 disciples to go up one by one and tell them what they had done after they went out, what the situation was, how they dealt with it at that time, and what their psychological state was like at that time. Yin Xiuxin. Without a doubt, The first to appear was the eldest senior sister, Yin Xiuxin. Yin Xiuxin, who should have been used to being watched by so many people and being the center of attention, had her face turned the color of a pig's liver. How could she go up and tell her own experience? Especially his own mental journey. It was simply too embarrassing. Should she lie? Should she cover it up? But how could she lie at this moment and place? Under the watchful eyes of the crowd and the expectation of the crowd, Yin Xiuxin's feet weighed 1,000 kilograms as she walked slowly up the platform. Her pretty little face was flushed, and she did not know where to put her hands. After being urged repeatedly, the eldest senior sister finally spoke hesitantly. I was deceived 9 times when I went out this time. Ha 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 ha. There was a burst of laughter below. Many people burst out laughing when they heard this, spitting until the heads of their peers in front of them were covered with saliva. But when I was deceived for the 10th time, I finally saw through the trick and exposed the scam. Yin Xiuxin explained anxiously. And after the 10th time, whether it was the 11th or the 12th time, I was never deceived again, not even once. The laughter below was even louder. Just tell me how many times you were deceived in total, asked Luo Dajiang. 9 times. Yin Xiuxin lowered her head. Another burst of laughter rang out. Tell me in detail, every time you've been cheated. Tell me all the details. Luo Dajiang put on the face of an impartial judge. Say it. Yin Yang tried hard to hold back his laughter and said, This is the real martial world experience. Tell me, it's a good thing for both you and others. As Yin Xiuxin recounted one embarrassing incident after another, the laughter continued to rise and fall. Yin Xiuxin was so embarrassed that tears were welling up in her eyes, but she did not dare to hide anything. She told all her encounters in an extremely aggrieved manner, and her face was already pale with embarrassment. Although Xiuxin's cultivation base is the best among all the disciples, she is still young after all, and it's inevitable that she will be deceived when she goes out to train alone. This is a lack of life experience, not a serious shortcoming. There's only one thing you need to remember. Xiuxin is the easiest to be deceived at her age, and you are the easiest to be deceived. Yin Yang said, Listen up all of you. When you travel the martial world, you may have to face the old foxes of the martial world, who are far more difficult than those who set up the trap for Xiuxin. It's not an exaggeration to say that it's easy to deal with rookies like you. What kind of person can live a long life in the martial world? It must be someone who is smooth and slick in all aspects. Only by adapting to the martial world can one have a leisurely life. Those who can't adapt to the martial world will only be eliminated by the martial world. What is elimination? It is to step on the path of death, and there is no turning back. Constantly summing up experiences and integrating them into one's own knowledge is the so-called martial world experience. Yes, everything that Xiuxin encountered when she went out to train this time is ridiculous. But in all fairness, if it were any of you, would anyone have the confidence to say that they could avoid all of them safely? Just because you have laughed doesn't mean that you will be fine. You have to learn from it. Because I don't want you to be eliminated. Do you understand? Yes. Your eldest senior sister has given up her dignity this time and taught you this lesson with her personal experience. This is not a joke, but the most precious personal experience, the most authentic experience. This is not only the martial world experience, but also a friendship, a truth. Yin Yang said earnestly. All the disciples no longer had a smile on their faces. They bowed together and said, Yes, we will follow sect leader master's teachings. Then, all of them bowed to Yin Xiuxin in unison. Thank you, eldest senior sister, for setting an example for us. Yin Xiuxin's blush deepened as she covered her eyes in embarrassment. Oh my, how embarrassing, she said while stomping her feet. Then it was Bai Yexing, who Xiaofan. This time, the entire process of sharing their experiences with the disciples did not take long. It only took a little more than 2 hours. In spite of this, Yin Yang had made it clear that all the disciples were to write down what they had learned based on the experiences of their 10 senior brothers and sisters after they went back to cultivate. No exception was allowed. In the following period of time, Qian Duoduo, Ping Xiaoyi, and Guanwanyang divided all the disciples who had yet to be accepted into the sect into 28 teams, with 500 people in each team. They were arranged according to their age first. Then they cultivated at the wind gap every day, allowing the spiritual wind to water their meridians for 3 consecutive days. As for those disciples whose meridians had reached a certain level, Yin Yang and the others combed them with a mystical skill. Boss, we really have too many genius disciples under us. Each of them is extraordinarily talented, Luo Dajiang exclaimed, looking at the disciples who filled the room. Once there were more than 10,000 people, there was no end to it. This statement had never been fake. Most of these disciples were still in their childhood, at the most suitable time for them to build their foundation. The shock of witnessing it with their own eyes was indescribable and shocking. Luo Dajiang was especially impressed by the current situation. There were at least 3,000 of these little fellows, who were more talented than he was when he was the same age. Most of the rest were about the same level as him, and only a few were slightly weaker than him. How could such a situation be possible? Luo Dajiang had been very proud of his talent and timing of entering the Tao in the past. He was one of the best among the Demiurge Flawed 10, but now it seemed that one's luck was really incomparable. Comparisons were odious. How is Itoa? The higher-ups were worried about this issue. Yin Yang chuckled. I've been paying attention to Itoa's chi, and it's still growing. However, no one is to disturb him during this period of time. What he's doing now is a path that no one has taken before. So we can't afford to be careless. This is something that deserves the most attention in the residence of 9 Supremes right now. Itoa is doing something super important like founding a sect. Why don't we stop calling him Itoa? Lan Ruajuan made a face and said, why not? I think it's better to keep the name fixed. If that fellow really succeeds, then his sword art shall be officially named Itoa Sword. Itoa Sword. What sword was that? Everyone was laughing, but they were all in agreement, quite willing to join forces to make this happen. Everyone chatted and laughed for a while, then went off to practice their martial arts. Qian Duo, on the other hand, continued his great plan to amass wealth. This fellow saw that the items in the sect's storeroom were increasing day by day, and he actually took out a lot of rare items and set up an auction house. At the same time, he also set up a bank. These two sides worked together and borrowed each other's strength. It was said that they were very famous and vaguely popular. Although these two projects were not well known yet, the money earned from these two shops was already enough to support the daily expenses of the residents of 9 Supremes. This was commendable. The residents of 9 Supremes had a sizable population now. Just the resources of food, clothing, and accommodation for the cultivators who had entered the Tao was already a considerable expenditure. It was not a trivial matter to be able to maintain the operation. Qian Duo is a talent, Dong Qitian said unhurriedly from behind Yun Yang. With such a majordomo in charge of internal affairs, other than his slightly lower cultivation base, everything else is impeccable. He's more than qualified to be the Sacred Heart Palace's general affairs manager. But Duodwa's cultivation base is still too low. With his current cultivation base, he's still weaker than many disciples, said Yun Yang. When he comes back, I'll have to ask Senior to urge him. Dong Qitian chuckled, his expression strange. This fellow is lazy, but he's afraid of death and pain. I know how to train him. Yun Yang laughed. Time flew, and another 3 days had passed. On this day, the sky suddenly changed, and the weather was unusual. It was the arrival of the Phoenix Cry Sect's upper echelons, causing the weather to change. When the Phoenix Cry Sect's upper echelons arrived outside the residence of 9 Supremes Mountain Gate, the 24 of them could already feel a sense of awe before they even entered the residence. Was this the newly upgraded residence of 9 Supremes? How could it occupy such a large area? Did the residence of 9 Supremes want to be the palace of 9 Supremes from the very beginning? Just by looking at it, one could tell that the residence of 9 Supremes occupied an extraordinarily vast area. Actually, the initial expansion of the residence of 9 Supremes was an unintentional move. Yin Yang did not understand the market at all and wanted to settle the matter in one go. Usually, when a martial artist wanted to establish a sect, It would be more than enough to build a boundary of 30 to 40 miles. After all, the larger the sect's base, the more facilities needed to be built inside, and the larger the external formation of the mountain gate would be. Blindly seeking to be big would only consume a lot of unnecessary resources, and the loss would outweigh the gain. However, Yin Yang did not understand these things at all. Moreover, he possessed resources far beyond the imagination of ordinary people, mountains and seas of ethereal amethysts. Therefore, from the beginning, he had chosen to occupy the 9 peaks directly and set up the residence of 9 Supremes Foundation formation in a large area with a high density. Then, he used the Celestial Luck Banner to further change the terrain, making the already unusually vast mountain gate even more expansive. When Qian Duoduo realized it, it was already too late. If not, he would not have gone back to save the children without a care. The place was too big and desolate with fewer people. In the beginning, he didn't do it on purpose. Up to the astonishing scale today, everything was just a lucky stroke of luck. Unfortunately, no matter if it was at this moment or in the endless years to come, no one would believe it no matter who told them that this was an accident, and that it was a mistake. Everyone said that the founding forefather of the residence of 9 Supremes was far-sighted and ambitious, and that his vision was naturally beyond the reach of ordinary people. The Phoenix Cry sect has come to visit the mountain. Please inform them. Gan Tianyan stepped forward to report. He thought that he would have to wait for a while. After all, the Phoenix Cry sect had come out in full force this time, so the residents of 9 Supremes had to be more vigilant. Unexpectedly, the mountain gate of the residence of 9 Supremes opened with a bang. As the mountain gate opened, a thick white mist of spiritual qi rushed out with a whoosh. Even though the people from the Phoenix Cry sect were all experienced and knowledgeable seniors, they all took a deep breath at the same time. What a pure spiritual qi! How comfortable! The bell rang. It rang 49 times. It was the bell to welcome the distinguished guests. Any sect with a bit of wealth in the bound of universe would do the same. Accompanying the welcoming bell was Yin Yang's hearty laughter that came from afar. It was indescribably adorable. The residence of 9 Supremes is honored by the arrival of sect leader Ping and other seniors. The group had already walked into the mountain gate. Along the way, there were exotic flowers and grasses, tall buildings, and fragrant scents. Honored by the presence? May I ask which part of it is fluffy? This is no longer modesty. You're actually showing off, aren't you? It was early in the morning, the time for the disciples of the residence of 9 Supremes to practice. Under the lead of a tall youth, a group of disciples ran out of the lodging while shouting their chants. The entire group lined up neatly and ran at a uniform speed towards the field. 500 people? They were all experienced martial artists. An elder could tell the exact number of people at a glance, and could not help but widen his eyes. These 500 disciples are not bad. Not bad? Not bad at all. The elders and hall masters of the Phoenix Cry sect only took a glance at them for a moment, before they were all stunned. In terms of talent, these 500 disciples had completely surpassed all the current disciples of the Phoenix Cry sect. So many? How could there be so many talented disciples? At this moment, even the sect leader, Ping Zhanyue, was a little stunned. Her eyes did not blink and could not move. It's true, it's actually true. What Senior Sister Gan said is all true. Oh my God. Chapter 1192. Before coming here, she had reminded herself repeatedly that what Junior Sister Gan had said might be true. She had to stay calm when the time came. She had to stay calm. She was the leader of Phoenix Cry sect. She had to stay calm and not lose her identity. However, Ping Zhanyue could not help but gulp now. As far as the eye could see, those pink and tender little faces were serious and adorable. Every single one of them was a person with excellent innate talent and excellent aptitude. Looking at their running postures, a few of these little fellows were born with the reverse genitals. The so-called inverse pallus bone referred to the elbow joint that could be bent at the same angle. An ordinary person's arm could only be bent forward. Pulling it backward would cause unbearable pain. And if too much force was exerted, it would break and cause serious injury. Those who had the inverse pallus bone could bend their arms backward and close to their shoulders. The flexibility of their arms was far beyond ordinary people. This was only the most common ability of those who had the inverse pallus bone. Those who had the inverse pallus bone must also have the unparalleled blade, which meant that they had an extra ligament on both sides of their arms. It was equivalent to doubling their strength. This was how they were born. These people were all natural martial arts prodigies, rare even among millions of people. But here, with just a glance, there were actually quite a few people with this kind of talent. Moreover, they were not the most outstanding among the 500 children. The 24 Phoenix Cry sect's higher-ups were all stunned. One of them mumbled in a low voice. Maybe the residents of Nine Supremes did it on purpose, gathering all the talented disciples into a team like this. No one responded to the strange voice. So what if there was only one team? There were 500 of them. 500 seedlings with extremely high aptitudes and talents. Such a number of people was something that other sects could hardly gather in the entire bound of universe. As they walked a few more steps forward, they heard more teams running towards them from the side. There were a few teams on the left and right, all of them walking in unison. Yun Yang led the way in front, leading the group forward. Excited by the prospect of hunting, the group stopped at the fork in the road and watched the three teams running towards them with interest, refusing to move a single inch. At this time, one of the teams ran past the crowd and bowed to Yun Yang in unison. "Greetings, sect leader master." Then he ran over without stopping, not stopping at all. Then there was another group, and then another. Including the first group, there were already 4 groups, a total of 2,000 people. At this time, the eyes of the 24 senior members of the Phoenix Cry sect, without exception, were all red with envy or jealousy. Genius. All of them were geniuses. Mother Ker. Or, heavens, if there are 2 who can inherit my mantle, I can die without regrets. Look, all of them are so well-behaved, so good-looking, so well-mannered, so sensible. There were 2,000 of them. Then in the distance, more and more people were shouting and running over, 24 people. Each of their feet seemed to be nailed to the road. Their eyes were fixed on the disciples who were running towards them, or turned around to look at the disciples who had already run far away. Another 500 people. 500 people. They were all neatly arranged in a square formation. In the end, everyone was already numb to it. They all felt as if they were in a dream. There were a total of 28 teams, and each team had 500 people. How many were 28 teams? I can't quite count it. My head is a little dizzy. It should be about 14,000 people. 14,000, oh my God! How did the residents of Nine Supremes find these children? Moreover, after the 28 teams, there was actually a team with the smallest number of people running past them. There were only 125 people in this team. It was only a quarter of the previous teams. But these 125 were obviously more talented. Oh my God, Ping Jinhua felt her palms heat up. She turned her head abruptly and looked at Gan Tianyan. She said firmly, "Senior sister, we can totally cooperate with the residents of Nine Supremes on this matter." A long-bearded male elder of the Phoenix Cry sect stared blankly and murmured almost unconsciously, It's true. A few of these children actually have golden skin and jade bones. More than 20 innate bodies. There's also the mysticaline body, the purine body, the reverse pallus bone, the immaculate body. I can't believe they have the immaculate body. I'm not dreaming, am I? Hiss. He turned his head and looked at Ping Jinhua, his beard trembling. Sect leader, there are 24 of us. Why don't we each teach a team? It's a little hard, but it's worth it. Although Ping Jinhua was excited, she was shocked back to reality by the elder's words. Each person a team? Do you have such a big appetite? Her first reaction was that even she, as the sect leader, did not have such a big hope. But this elder of hers actually wanted to take all of them in one go. He was really daring. But why didn't he do it? According to the original plan, the Phoenix Cry sect would cooperate with the residents of Nine Supremes, providing teachers, techniques, and resources to train the many disciples in front of them. The future was undoubtedly promising. After a few years, When these disciples had achieved something, they would be grateful to their masters and provide resources to the Phoenix Cry sect. With the experience of the Phoenix Cry sect's elders, they should be able to gain something from this. However, this was still not as good as taking all the 14,000 disciples in front of them, was it not? Now that the strongest force of the Phoenix Cry sect had come to the hinterland of the residence of 9 Supremes, the protection of the mountain gate could no longer be used. The residents of 9 Supremes could only deal with the strongest force of the Phoenix Cry sect with their own combat strength. With the Phoenix Cry sect's understanding of the combat strength of both sides, it was really not difficult to destroy the residents of 9 Supremes' upper echelons. Yun Yang and the others had improved since the Battle of the Celestial Luck Banner, but they were at most at the level of the Phoenix Cry sect's Qi Lai. It was not difficult to destroy them. Almost all the Phoenix Cry sect's upper echelons had the same thought. In the bound of universe, where the strongest fist was the most powerful, the residents of 9 Supremes, which had excellent resources and so many talented disciples, was like a child making a fool of himself. What was more, this child did not have an adult backing him up. With such a shortcut in front of them, several elders were already thinking about it and letting their imaginations run wild. Before Ping Zhanyue, the sect leader, could do anything, Gan Tianyin curled her lips and said, "Forget it, all of you. Let me tell you the truth. Even if you kill all the upper echelons of the residents of 9 Supremes now, you can't really win the hearts of these children." She sighed and said, "There are geniuses everywhere here, and I'm not blind. How can I turn a blind eye to them? I've tried to recruit them a long time ago, okay? It's a pity that these little fellows have been seriously brainwashed by the residents of 9 Supremes. They're all loyal. The upper echelons of the residents of 9 Supremes are very confident about this. They've asked me to recruit as many as I can, but I've been busy for more than a month, and I haven't recruited a single one. To put it more bluntly, if we really have any conflict with the upper echelons of the residents of 9 Supremes here, these little fellows will most likely hate us for the rest of their lives. You must be dreaming if you want to take them in as disciples. No, if we're really targeted by these little fellows, we might have to guard against their revenge for the rest of our lives. Qi Lai is a good example. I'll say this first, don't blame me for not warning you." When the other elders heard this, their faces immediately became gloomy. It was true. Just by looking at the groups of disciples coming over, and the way each child looked at Yun Yang as they bowed, one could tell that it was admiration from the bottom of their hearts. Gratitude and admiration that came from the bottom of their hearts. They were even fanatical. Therefore, this shortcut was obviously not a real shortcut. It was basically a dead end, and it could not be taken. It would also completely ruin Phoenix Cry sect's reputation. However, as they denied the shortcut, a new problem arose. If these children were only grateful to Yun Yang and the other upper echelons, then it would be fine. It could be reversed in a few years, but this worship and admiration wasn't something that could be easily erased. It would be even more difficult to deal with that fanaticism, especially if they really did something wrong and said that they would hate them for the rest of their lives. It was obviously true and not false at all. Then, how many chances would they have in the cooperation plan? How many disciples would they be able to gain in the end? This question was not only realistic, but it was also sharp and could not be avoided. No matter how talented the disciples in front of them were, if they could not be taken in for their own use, they would still be working for others, and it would not be in their own interest. Yun Yang's faint chuckle rang out. "Sect leader Ping, these disciples of mine are not bad, are they?" "They're not only not bad." Ping Zhanyue swallowed and said, "Sect leader Yun, junior sister Gan has mentioned how our two sects should cooperate before, but this is a serious matter after all. I hope that both sides can enter the discussion agenda as soon as possible." If what she saw was true, the little girl just now had the spirit phoenix physique that was the most compatible with her sect's highest cultivation method. Ninth Heaven Phoenix Cry Divine Art. This discovery made Ping Zhanyue's eyes widen. She had to take this little girl in no matter what. "I'm afraid this matter can't be resolved in a short time," Yun Yang said elegantly. "Everyone, please come in and have some tea. Let's talk while we drink. The upper echelons of both sides are here. The opportunity for both sides to cooperate has been established, and their sincerity has been demonstrated. What follows is just a minor detail. Yun Yang ignored the slightly malicious gazes of the Phoenix Cry sect's upper echelons. With Dong Qitian here, if the Phoenix Cry sect dared to have any evil thoughts, they would probably be annihilated here. The 24 upper echelons of the Phoenix Cry sect were so anxious that their mouths were blistered, but they still nodded. All right. They followed Yun Yang into the main hall of the central peak. Sigh. I'm like a fish on the chopping block now, but I can't turn the tables and confront them with force. How can I not give in? Luo Dajiang and the others were waiting at the door, greeting them in unison. It could not be helped. Because of Jiang Luoluo, all the upper echelons of the residents of Nine Supremes were collectively one generation lower, so they all treated the people of the Phoenix Cry sect as a senior. Ping Zhenyue led her disciples to return the greeting. Although the residents of Nine Supremes was very respectful and considered themselves juniors, it was only because they had given them face. The residents of Nine Supremes was now a true middle-class celestial luck banner sect, and it was also the initiator and key person of this cooperation. How could they allow themselves to be careless? Both sides looked amiable and elegant. Led by Ping Zhenyue, the people of the Phoenix Cry sect all stared at Luo Dajiang and the other 8 men standing at the door. They could see that each of them was tall and straight, and had a dignified appearance. And judging from their cultivation base, they had improved by at least 1 tier, compared to when they were in the Celestial Luck Banner competition. Except for a few people, the rest of the Phoenix Cry sect's upper echelons had all attended the previous Celestial Luck Banner contest, so they thought they knew the combat strength of the upper echelons of the residents of Nine Supremes very well. But now, it was obviously very different from what they had expected. There were a total of 9 of the Demiurge Flawed 10, and only Shi Wuchen was missing. Among the 9, 6 of them were at the peak of the 3rd grade Saint King realm, while the remaining 3 were not just slightly weaker, but stronger, having already reached the 4th grade Saint King realm. Among them Luo Dajiang, who had the highest cultivation, had already reached the peak of the 4th grade Saint King realm. This kind of cultivation speed was unbelievable and unbelievable. Ping Zhenyue sighed inwardly. Geniuses like these have been used as whetstones by the various sects for a long time in the past. They've always been silent and not stirred up any waves. Now they've not only amazed the world with a single brilliant feat, but they've also soared into the sky and reached the peak. I really don't know what those people would think now that they know about their progress. If all the genius whetstones in this world are like this, I'm afraid everyone will fight to be a whetstone. Luo, on the other hand, has a good eye and a good fate. She fell in love with Luo Dajiang at first sight. In the past, I and junior sister Gon were the ones who tried to stop them, almost breaking up this great marriage. Now that we're working together, this so-called cooperation is actually our sect coveting the disciples of the residents of Nine Supremes, and we're here to poach them. Everything is just an excuse. Thinking of this, Ping Zhenyue could not help feeling embarrassed, and did not know what to say. Please. After entering the main hall, everyone took their seats. Yun Yang did not sit on his high and mighty sect leader's chair, but chose to sit opposite the square table with everyone else. There was a long square table in the main hall of the residents of Nine Supremes, which was usually used by the higher-ups to discuss matters. It did not look crowded even if a dozen or 20 people sat there, but the number of people seated at this time was a little over the limit. On one side of the table were Yun Yang, Luo Dajiang, and the other 8 people. Yun Yang sat in the middle, so he did not look crowded. On the other side were the 24 people from the Phoenix Cry sect. There were too many people, so it inevitably looked a little crowded. But no one cared about these details now. All of them were deep in thought, thinking about how they should speak later, and how they could get the most out of it. At this point, the cooperation between the 2 sides had already been decided, and there was no need to doubt it. The next question was how to get more benefits from the cooperation. At this time, Yun Xiuxin and the others acted as tea boys and came in to serve tea. When the aroma of tea filled the air, everyone's thoughts came to an end, and they all looked up with expectant faces. Yun Yang stared at Ping Zhenyue with a warm smile on his handsome face and said, "Sect Leader Ping, on behalf of the residents of Nine Supremes, I welcome all the seniors." As soon as Yun Yang said that, the 10 people on the other side bowed their heads to show their respect. The people from the Phoenix Cry sect, led by Ping Zhenyue, bowed slightly to show that they did not dare to accept the greeting from the residents of Nine Supremes. Then Ping Zhenyue said, "Sect Leader Yin, you're too polite. Senior Gon has consulted me about the lack of teachers in our sect, which has inevitably delayed the progress of many disciples' cultivation base. So I propose to senior the cooperation between our two sects at the right time." Yun Yang said slowly. "All the seniors are magnanimous, especially when it comes to the matter of Luoluo and Dajiang. You are magnanimous, compassionate, and full of the demeanor of an elder. I've long admired you, and I feel even more cordial and reliable for Senior Gon to point out the shortcomings of our sect without hesitation." At this point, he showed an even brighter smile and said, "So, we have no objection to the cooperation with your sect, and we even have some expectations. After all, almost all of our disciples are talented cultivators with excellent aptitudes, and we don't want to delay any of them because of our selfishness. Since the seniors are willing to help, we are naturally happy to see it happen." Ping Zhenyue smiled and said, "Sect Leader Yin is still too polite. In fact, our sect also values this cooperation very much. Since it's a cooperation, we will naturally take what we need. Not only is there no help, but there is also no help at all. In this cooperation, the Phoenix Cry sect will not only benefit from it, but the benefits will also be considerable. It's true that we're taking advantage of the residents of Nine Supremes." Very sensitively, Ping Zhenyue brushed away Yin Yang's mention of help and made it clear, putting the Phoenix Cry sect's position in an unusually obvious light. After listening to the sect leader's words, the other 23 people from the Phoenix Cry sect all had a slightly strange expression on their faces, but they immediately turned calm. The sect leader's words were straight to the point, setting the relationship between both parties on the basis of cooperation. It was a direct and targeted speech. "Help. Who said that we're going to help you? If we acknowledged it from the beginning, and if it really became a help, wouldn't it be a huge loss? We're here for the benefits. If there's no equivalent benefit in the end, only a fool would come." Yun Yang laughed and said, "Seniors, you may not know this, but these children have unique backgrounds, and each of their lives is very tragic. I've always treated each of them as my own, and I look forward to them even more than ordinary elders. I hope that they'll be successful in their careers and have a promising future. No matter which sect they eventually become in the future, it's all good. However, for now the arrival of seniors and the rest of you, to me, is to help. Therefore this word of thanks is still necessary. This is the gratitude of the parents of these disciples, and it has nothing to do with anything else." Yun Yang smiled and said, "However, Sect Leader Ping's straightforward cooperation is also the crux of our summit this time. Even though this cooperation is considered a foregone conclusion, this cooperation still requires both parties to show corresponding sincerity. Sect Leader Ping, don't you think so?" Ping Zhenyue said, "Of course." Yin Yang chuckled and suddenly changed the topic. "Now that Sect Leader Ping has personally come to the residence of Nine Supremes, although it's only a glimpse, you've at least seen the environment here. Forgive me for asking, but how is the cultivation environment of the residents of Nine Supremes compared to that of the Phoenix Cry sect?" Ping Zhenyue's expression turned awkward, but she still said directly, "The residence of Nine Supremes is beautiful, and the spiritual chi here is so rich that it's the first time I've seen it in my life. Whether it's the scale, the purity of the spiritual chi, or the range of the atmosphere, it's better than that of the Phoenix Cry sect. If I hadn't seen it with my own eyes, I wouldn't have believed it." This knowledge naturally made the people of the Phoenix Cry sect feel ashamed, but no one said anything. There was nothing to say. Ever since they came in, they had long realized that the spiritual chi atmosphere of the residents of Nine Supremes was much stronger than that of the Phoenix Christ sect. The difference in spiritual chi was at least 3 times more than that of the Phoenix Christ sect. This was an unbelievable fact, but it was an undeniable fact. Denying this fact would only make one look even more ungentlemanly, and it was meaningless. Therefore, regarding the location of the training of the disciples, since the beginning of our cooperation, the entire process will be carried out in the residence of Nine Supremes territory. I believe there's no room for discussion about this, is there? He smiled faintly and said, the initial starting point of our cooperation is for the future of the disciples, so that they can better come into contact with the martial arts. Sect leader Ping, do you have any objections? As soon as Yin Yang said this, everyone in Phoenix Christ sect was stunned. Phoenix Christ sect did not want to waste the time of so many talented disciples in poaching the disciples of the residence of Nine Supremes, but Yin Yang was using his own words to attack them. He was also talking about the progress of the disciples' cultivation. Although Ping Zhenyue wanted to bring the disciples back to teach them, she was a person of great status after all, and she could not say anything that would betray her conscience. Yin Yang was right. If they continued to cultivate in the residence of Nine Supremes, the progress would be at least 3 times faster than if they cultivated in the Phoenix Christ sect. This was undoubtedly very beneficial to the growth of the disciples. That's right. Let's set the location of the training of the disciples in the residence of Nine Supremes. Ping Zhenyue exchanged glances with the others and saw the affirmation in their eyes. After some thought, she finally nodded in agreement. Yin Yang was immediately relieved of the burden in his heart. According to Yin Yang's plan, the most important thing was none other than the location. It could almost be said that as long as the location of the training could be confirmed in the residence of Nine Supremes, the entire plan would be a success. The rest of the follow-up was actually not important. However, Yin Yang still needed to continue the discussion now. Since the training location has been confirmed in the residence of Nine Supremes, all the resources related to the cultivation, such as the consumed mystical crystals and spiritual materials, as well as clothing, food, accommodation, and so on, will naturally be provided by the residents of Nine Supremes. I've promised Senior Gan about this before, and it's still valid now. Sect leader Ping shouldn't have any objections to this, right? Yin Yang chuckled and said leisurely, absolutely not. There's no such logic. Ping Zhenyue objected immediately without thinking. Not only Ping Zhenyue, but the other 23 people also shook their heads in unison, their refusal obvious. What kind of joke was this? If they followed Yin Yang's plan, the Phoenix Christ sect would naturally have a great advantage in terms of the consumption of financial and material resources. The food, drink, accommodation, and cultivation resources would all be provided by the residents of Nine Supremes, and they did not need to pay a single cent more. It seemed like they had gained a great advantage, but in fact, it was not the case at all. The main purpose of the cooperation between the residents of Nine Supremes and the Phoenix Christ sect this time had never been about resources, but the disciples. The final focus was on the future belonging of the disciples who had a successful cultivation base. Gan Tianyan had already made it clear that the target disciples had all been brainwashed by the residents of Nine Supremes' upper echelons and had a strong sense of belonging. Now that all the resources were provided by the residents of Nine Supremes, would there still be disciples who would follow them in the future? The upper echelons of the Phoenix Christ sect had even reached a consensus that they would use a large number of resources to win the favor of the target disciples. Now that the residents of Nine Supremes had promised to provide all the resources, was it not to kill the chance of them wanting to show kindness to the disciples? How were they going to win the hearts of these little fellows? Ping Zhenyue and the others had even begun to imagine that if they really followed Yin Yang's plan, in the eyes of these little fellows, they would just be making a living in the residence of Nine Supremes. Would they want to take the target with them in the future? What kind of nonsense was that? Therefore, on this point, the 24 people of the Phoenix Christ sect obviously had the same idea. Whether the selected disciples will follow us in the future or not, even if they collectively choose to stay in the residence of Nine Supremes in the end, All the resources they need in the process of cultivation must be provided by us. The resources we provide will only be more than those provided to the true disciples of the Phoenix Cry sect. Ping Zhanyue's words were very clear, and she was very generous. The treatment of the true disciples of the Phoenix Cry sect was undoubtedly first class. Jiang Luoluo was the leader of the female true disciples of the Phoenix Cry sect, and the treatment she enjoyed was unusually high. To put it bluntly, if Luo Dajiang did not have the opportunity of the residence of 9 Supremes, he could not even afford to support his own wife with his personal savings. Yin Yang frowned and said hesitantly, "A man's words are trustworthy, and a man's words are trustworthy. I have solemnly promised Senior Gon that you only need to provide the teachers. Besides, we are a family, so there is no need to fuss over these details." Ping Zhanyue interrupted him and said, "This is not a matter of whether we are a family or not, but a matter of our own responsibilities. We treat the selected disciples as true disciples, so he is a true disciple of the Phoenix Cry sect. No matter what he chooses in the end, at least in our hearts, he is already a disciple of our sect. How can we ask for the things that our disciples need for cultivation?" She spoke righteously, but she was cursing inwardly. "Who is a family with you? We are here to poach him. And the cultivation resources are a wonderful way for us to show our strength and win people's hearts. How can we miss this opportunity?" Yin Yang frowned again and said, "Doesn't this make the residents of 9 Supremes look petty? Sect leader Yin, you are wrong. Our original intention of coming here is to not let the outstanding disciples go to waste. Not only do we have to bear the cultivation needs of the selected disciples, but we also don't need the residents of 9 Supremes to provide for our own food and clothing." Ping Zhanyue smiled sweetly and said, "Even blood brothers have to settle accounts clearly, not to mention that we are 2 middle-class celestial luck banner sections." Yin Yang thought for a moment and said reluctantly, "In that case we will do as sect leader Ping says, but there is no need to be so clear about this matter. It is too cliché to be calculative. At least for the next period of time, let the residents of 9 Supremes be the host." Ping Zhanyue smiled and said, "The cooperation with the residents of 9 Supremes this time is already an unexpected opportunity for our sect. If we encroach on it again, it will be as bad as not doing enough. We have brought all the expenses with us, so there is no need for sect leader Yin to worry. Be the host. No need." He couldn't take advantage of her at all. This was related to the major problem of recruiting. At this moment, the other 23 people of the Phoenix Cry sect were full of admiration for their sect leader's judgment and actions. Those who were not very quick-witted immediately understood, after being explained by their peers through telepathy. The sect leader was indeed the sect leader. He had judgment and decisiveness, and the results were immediate. If it were them, they would have fallen into the sect leader Yun's trap with just a few words. This pretty boy's every word was a trap. As long as this fellow paid for a day's expenses, the Phoenix Cry sect might become a poor sect under the deliberate exaggeration of the residents of 9 Supremes. Yin Yang was helpless as he chuckled and said, "Sect leader Ping, you're truly the leader of a sect. This is too." The faces of the 23 people of the Phoenix Cry sect all revealed proud expressions, each of them full of arrogance. "Humph, you want to fight with our sect leader with this little trick of yours? Next, it's about the details of the accommodation." Yin Yang pointed casually and said, "I'm going to mark out a separate area over there. It may not be very big, about 100 acres in circumference, for the seniors and chosen disciples of the Phoenix Cry sect. I wonder if this is enough for you, sect leader Ping?" That's enough. Ping Zhanyue agreed without hesitation. What a joke. The Phoenix Cry sect, including the entire mountain, is only about 1,000 acres of land. In fact, the place used for cultivation is only about 200 acres. Now we're giving 100 acres here? It's too spacious. Do you want us to move a small part of the Phoenix Cry sect to the residents of 9 Supremes? The houses have been built over there, with individual courtyards. You can choose the house you like, Yin Yang said. All right. As for the expenses of the houses over there, including the construction costs, we'll rent them all. I'll settle the bill with sect leader Yin later. Ping Jianyue had made up her mind. Nothing needed to be free. She had already spent a lot of money, so why should she care about the little money of renting a house? The other disciples nodded secretly at Ping Jianyue's decision. I'll buy everything with money, and I won't take advantage of the residents of Nine Supremes at all. From this aspect, it shows that the Phoenix Cry sect is rich. All right, Yunyang said. Next, it's about the number of disciples to be trained and trained. There are a total of 14,300 disciples in residence of Nine Supremes. Xiuxin and the others are our inner disciples, so they are inconvenient to be selected by you. Seniors, I don't think you have any objection to this, do you? Ping Jianyue looked incredulous and asked in surprise. What do you mean, sect leader Yin? Gan Tianyin had said that it was their turn to choose disciples after the residents of Nine Supremes selected the inner sect disciples. Although Ping Jianyue felt helpless about this, she could do nothing about it because it was the right thing to do. If it were her, she would do the same. But now, Yun Yang's words. It seemed that there was another change, and this change was the situation that she wanted to see the most? Yun Yang smiled faintly and said, the basis of our cooperation is to show enough goodwill. My words are simple and clear. Except for Xiuxin and the other 60 to 70 people, you can choose the other disciples at will. As soon as this was said, the people of the Phoenix Cry sect were overjoyed and could not hide it. Isn't this giving us priority in choosing target disciples? This is great. Sect leader Yun, the sincerity that you have shown is really, we are a little embarrassed. Ping Jianyue said politely and then said, but since sect leader Yin has said so, if we continue to refuse, it will seem that we are not close enough. We will accept your sincerity and accept it. 23 Phoenix Cry sect's higher-ups tried their best to keep a straight face, but they were laughing in their hearts. He was indeed the sect leader. When it was time to refuse, he did not hesitate, but when it was time to take advantage of them, he did not even hesitate. He even said it firmly. They had to take advantage of him. They could not be courteous at this moment. If they were courteous and Yun Yang took advantage of the situation, they would not be able to cry even if they wanted to. Yun Yang smiled warmly and said, Senior is the one who is courteous. This is how it should be, how it should be. It was too smooth. Everyone in the Phoenix Cry sect felt the same way. They even had a subtle feeling that everything was in the palm of their hands. Next, it's about the candidates and the number of people. Yun Yang laughed and said, Sect leader Ping, may I ask how many people from your sect have come here to be disciples? Hearing Yun Yang's words, Ping Jianyue hesitated for the first time. She slowly turned to look at her peers. However, he saw that his fellow disciples were all looking forward to it, and some even couldn't wait. Ping Jianyue paused and said in a low voice, Who are you? Before he could finish speaking, he heard 23 people say in unison, I'll stay. At this moment, no one had the slightest bit of hesitation. They spoke in unison without any cooperation. Cough cough. Yun Yang could not help but laugh out loud in excitement. He quickly coughed twice to cover it up. Things seemed to be going too smoothly. Yun Yang could not help but have a subtle feeling that everything was in the palm of his hands. It was a feeling that everything was in the palm of his hands. The question was whose feeling was real, and whose was not. Chapter 1193. Strictly speaking, it was Ping Jianyue's support for the disciples. She had never thought that the hearts of the people in her sect would actually be so united. All of them were willing to stay, without any hesitation. Looking at the 23 people, Ping Jianyue almost wanted to roar. What do you want? If all of you stay here, what will happen to Phoenix Cry Sect's base camp? Are we going to leave a bunch of disciples and elder ancestors to fend for themselves? Elder Lu, who was the oldest among them, spoke first with a face full of wrinkles and a trembling voice. I'm old now, and I probably don't have many days left to live. However, my wish in this life has not been fulfilled yet. I have 3 wishes in my life. One is to walk on the path of Tao, but I'm old now, and this wish is destined to be impossible. My second wish is that Phoenix Cry sect can flourish, and with the cooperation of the sect leader and everyone else, our sect will not decline. However, my third wish is to take in a suitable successor. Unfortunately, my cultivation method is different from the others, and it requires a disciple's talent and physique the most. It's something that can only be found by chance, and I thought that this wish would be difficult to fulfill. Unexpectedly, I've seen several young men who are exceptionally compatible with my unique cultivation method in the residents of Nine Supremes' territory today. Heaven has truly taken pity on me, giving me this opportunity to fulfill my long-cherished wish. Our sect and the residents of Nine Supremes' agenda has been set, and someone must be stationed here. I'll be the first to sign up, and I'll definitely do my best to groom them and stand on this last post, so that I can answer to the elder ancestors when I die in the future. My fellow disciples, please don't fight with me over this, okay? Elder Lu's words were spoken with deep emotion, with the desolation of an old man. Even the declaration that he would not hesitate to die was enough to intimidate everyone present. If it had been any other occasion, his presence would have been a foregone conclusion. However, just as he finished speaking, before he finished speaking, the other white-haired elderly coughed and faintly said, "What Senior Brother Lu said makes sense. We are old and frail. How can we endure such a long and arduous journey back home?" Calculating it, this old man's age is not much younger than Senior Brother Lu's. I think it won't be long before I die. I'll stay here and accompany Senior Brother Lu. Ahem. Although I'm in my twilight years, I still have some experience and knowledge. I'm happy to make one last contribution to the sect. I'm duty-bound. At this moment, the two of them were completely different from when they first arrived. They had white hair and ruddy complexions. Their faces were ruddy, and their white hair was bleak. Even their eyes seemed to be turbid. Just then, a female elder with a few strands of white hair let out a long, desolate sigh. I'm getting on in years. My body isn't as good as it used to be these 2 years. I don't want to move no matter where I go. Now that I've come to the residence of Nine Supremes and coincide with the sect's joint appointment, I'll just be lazy and stay here to train a few disciples for the sect. She did not want to leave at all. Gan Tianyan rolled her eyes and said, "Senior brothers and sisters, of course, all of you are loyal. For the sake of the sect, how can I, Gan Tianyan, fall behind? I'm also happy to stay here and contribute to the sect. Besides, I was the one who suggested this, and I'm the one in charge of it. I still need to discuss with sect leader Yin and the other peak masters of the residents of Nine Supremes about the follow-up. Nobody can be absent, but I can't be absent. Moreover, Luo's in-laws are here. The child has always been timid, and she can't get used to leaving me." Hearing Gan Tianyan's words, the elders of the Phoenix Cry sect glared at her. "You said that you're going to contribute, and that's a fact. No one will object to it. But what did you say next? Luo is timid? May I ask, how is that girl timid? If she's a little braver, she'll probably set fire to the Phoenix Cry sect. And she'll do it more than once. She's chased her husband from the south to the north alone, and she's never suffered any loss. May I ask, where do you see that she's timid?" The other female disciples were shocked when they saw the poisonous insects. This girl has been playing with poisonous insects since she was 3 years old. Is this a sign of timidity? However, no matter how indignant everyone was, what Gan Tianyan said was reasonable. Whether it was reasonable or not, no one could deny it. Therefore, it was already a foregone conclusion that she would stay here. At this moment, the female elders who had deliberately maintained their youthful looks and figures were a little embarrassed. This is not right. Everyone's real age is about the same, but now all of you are so slovenly and pretentious. And you're saying that it's reasonable? This is not right. It's even more wrong. Ahem. Although I look young on the surface, my heart is already old. I know that the reason why our sect can prosper so much is because of the countless efforts and hard work that my senior brothers and sisters have put in for the sect. In the past, I've always reaped the fruits of others' labor, and I've long felt guilty and uneasy. This time, no matter what, I must stay here and contribute to the development of the sect. I must train a few more disciples, and only then can I make up for my past mistakes. A young and beautiful female elder spoke in a righteous and stern manner. That's right, that's right. I've been concentrating on cultivation all these years. Although I've made some personal achievements, I've made no contribution to the development of the sect. I'm very ashamed. I hope that the sect leader can give me a chance to stay here and contribute. I don't dare to say anything else, but I have a lot of say in cultivation. I'm ashamed. 23 people spoke one after another. Their words were filled with all sorts of strange meanings. But in general there was only one meaning. I want to stay here. Everyone was like that. No one was an exception. However, after a while, when they finally saw Ping Jinyue's cold face that was as dark as water, they slowly shut their mouths and sat there awkwardly, not daring to speak anymore. Ping Jinyue took a deep breath, finally suppressing the sudden surge of energy that had just surged. I want to stay here too, okay? But now that you've said all the high-sounding reasons, what else do you want me to say? What else can I say? Of course, while Ping Jinyue was thinking further about the cooperation with the residents of Nine Supremes, she was also thinking about the issue of Phoenix Cry Sect's inheritance. The residents of Nine Supremes had relented and given very convenient conditions. The cooperation was already set in stone, and the problem of genius disciples, the hardest to solve, was no longer a problem. However, another problem followed: the candidate for the sect leader's position. The candidate for the sect leader's successor had always been a big problem, and it could be said to be the most important problem in the sect. Generally speaking, the successor of the sect leader would be chosen by the disciples of the sect leader, the best of the best. Only the most outstanding and the most respected person would be able to take up the position of sect leader. Very few people would feel dissatisfied or dissatisfied. This was because the disciples of the sect leader's faction had always been the most outstanding in the entire sect. In fact, whenever there was a new disciple, the sect leader's disciples would be the first to choose. For example, Ping Jinyue's first disciple, Chi Lai, was the top person in the entire Phoenix Cry sect, and no one was above him. However, with this opportunity of cooperation, the situation was very different. According to common sense, all 24 Phoenix Cry sect's higher-ups could stay, but it was inconvenient for Ping Jinyue, the sect leader, to stay here to teach disciples. She had to return to Phoenix Cry sect to preside over the sect. However, the aptitude of Phoenix Cry sect's disciples was obviously far inferior to the residents of Nine Supremes' disciples. Then, what would happen when these disciples grew up in the future? What would happen? Forcing the original disciples of the sect leader to continue taking over the power would obviously not convince everyone. However, if she did not do so, would the power not be given to someone else? If the sect leader, which had been passed down for more than 20 generations since her founding master, was replaced by someone else, Ping Jinyue would definitely not allow it. She could not tolerate it. Therefore, seeing her senior brothers and sisters eagerly wanting to stay, Ping Jinyue could not help but feel a sense of helplessness that could not be dispelled. What should she do? What was the right thing to do? Let's discuss who should stay when we get back to the base. Don't quarrel here. It'll be embarrassing if we let sect leader Yun see us as a joke. Ping Jinyue spoke up to stop the farce. This made Yun Yang, who was watching the show, cough. His expression turned serious again, and he sat up straight. As Ping Jinyue spoke, the 23 experts of the Phoenix Cry sect stopped fighting and sat down awkwardly. It was obvious that they had realized that their actions just now were very inappropriate. Let's limit the number of people and the teaching time first. Ping Jinyue sucked in a breath and suppressed the resentment in her heart. Yin Yang said, "Sect leader Ping, please speak your mind. I think that the teaching time shouldn't be too short, but it can't be too long either." Ping Jinyue said, "What do you think, sect leader Yin? I would like to hear your opinion first." Yin Yang thought about it and said, "I believe that sect leader Ping and all the seniors have seen the condition of these disciples. The youngest among them is only about 5 or 6 years old, while the older ones are no more than 15 or 16 years old at most. To train these disciples, even if they have some minor achievements, I believe that it'll be difficult to do so without 8 to 10 years of training. When Yin Yang said this, everyone nodded in unison. They were all experts in cultivation, so naturally, they would not have any doubts about this. As the saying went, it took 10 years to grow a tree, but 100 years to nurture a person. 10 years was still too little. This is what I think. If we limit the teaching time to 3 or 5 years, then we, the residents of 9 Supremes, will be taking advantage of all of you and harboring evil intentions. I'm afraid that it'll be difficult to finish teaching them in such a short amount of time, and it'll be even more impossible for the disciples to feel touched and follow you willingly. Yin Yang looked at the people of the Phoenix Cry sect as he said this. The 24 people nodded in agreement once more. What Yin Yang had said was very reasonable, and he had put it in the light. If that's the case, why don't we set a slightly longer time limit? How about 10 years? Yin Yang looked at Ping Zhanyue for her opinion and said, 10 years is enough for a 5 or 6-year-old toddler to grow into a young man who can basically understand everything. Besides, I'm not afraid of angering all of you seniors, but if you can't change someone after 10 years, I'm afraid the other party will still not leave with you even after a few more decades. This may not sound nice, but it's the truth. I hope all of you seniors will consider it. The people nodded, still agreeing that what he said was true and reasonable. 10 years later, a 16 or 17-year-old young man would already have the sense of right and wrong to distinguish between good and bad, as well as a personality with independent opinions and thoughts. If he was still unwilling to follow them by then as Yin Yang had said, even if he taught them for another 50 or 100 years, their relationship would still remain at the stage of forming a good relationship. It would never be able to change his mind, and he would still be a member of the residents of 9 Supremes. 10 years is fine. Ping Zhanyue nodded. The time was set just like that. Then there's the number of people. May I know how many people you are aiming for, seniors? Yin Yang asked. When he mentioned the number of people, the people of the Phoenix Cry sect widened their eyes again. Teaching 1 or 2 disciples was obviously a different concept from teaching 100 or 200 disciples. However, to the people of the Phoenix Cry sect, the more people the better. Yin Yang said, Seniors, there's something I have to say first. The number of disciples we're planning to give up is not a lot. I hope that seniors can understand. Upon hearing this, the faces of the people from the Phoenix Cry sect immediately became gloomy and uncertain. They no longer had the amiable expressions they had before. However, what Yin Yang had said was within reason. Anyone would be able to understand it. The sect had recruited many talented disciples, but it was their own ability. Why should they give up a lot of disciples? Should they let you do whatever you want? It's already good enough to let you have a share of the profits, all right? Ping Zhanyue said cautiously. May I ask how many disciples sect leader Yin is planning to give to us? Yin Yang chuckled and said, Sect leader Ping, I think it's better for you to tell us what the number is in your heart. Give us a rough number, and we'll discuss it on this basis and adjust accordingly. Ping Zhanyue was immediately conflicted. Give a number? What should she say? How could she be satisfied if she said too little? However, if she really said too much, there would definitely be a conflict of words, causing the originally harmonious atmosphere to become estranged. Furthermore, she would seem too greedy and become a laughing stock. Yin Yang encouraged/bewitched her as much as he could. Actually, this number of people is just a business to me. Sect leader Ping, feel free to say it. As the saying goes, ask for as much as you want. If sect leader Ping asks for too much and exceeds the bottom line of my heart, I won't agree to it no matter what. Will I? As he said this, he laughed twice, with a hint of self-mockery. Immediately, everyone's gaze focused on Ping Zhanyue. Ping Zhanyue gritted her teeth and took a deep breath. Her bright eyes scanned the faces of her fellow disciples, and she finally said resolutely, Sect leader Yin, the fundamental reason for our cooperation this time is that your sect doesn't have enough teachers. How about a 50-50 split? When the upper echelons of the Phoenix Cry sect heard this, they were immediately shocked to the point that they were thrown into a state of disarray. Sect leader, you really dare to ask for a sky-high price? You're really asking for a sky-high price just because he said so? A 50-50 split. This sect leader, Yin, must have gone crazy when she heard this. We want a lot, but a 50-50 split is something we've never even thought about. Otherwise, she's the sect leader, and we can't compare. As expected, Yin Yang vetoed it decisively. No, absolutely not. There's no such logic. If sect leader Ping were to split it like this, wouldn't you be giving half of the residents of Nine Supremes to her? Ping Zhenyue was already prepared for Yin Yang's attitude. She snorted, not offended, and said, "Then sect leader Yin, please state the number." Yin Yang said, "How about 100? One asked for 7,000, while the other countered with 100. The difference was just too much. Everyone immediately felt a toothache again. That was exactly what the old saying was true, asking for a sky-high price, and then returning it on the ground. It was a textbook deduction. Both sides were too ridiculous. 6,000. Ping Zhenyue's eyes shone as she lowered the price. However, this number was still ridiculous, and the people of the Phoenix Cry sect still thought so. No, it's still too much. I'll compromise again. How about 150? 5,000? No, 200 at most. The two sect leaders began to bargain like street peddlers, gradually testing each other's bottom line. Ping Zhenyue's ideal number was around 500. If they could really get 500 genius disciples from the residents of Nine Supremes, it would be a great victory for the Phoenix Cry sect. It was because of this mentality that she had asked for 7,000, a number that would have sounded ridiculous to anyone. She was not the least bit angry at Yin Yang's rejection, for she knew that it was absolutely impossible. 3,000. Ping Zhenyue continued to test him. The basis of the cooperation is the sincerity of both sides. I can only give you 400 disciples at most. I really can't go any higher. Yin Yang clenched his teeth and took every step carefully. Sect leader Yin, we've already shown enough sincerity for this collaboration. With how loyal those children are to the residents of Nine Supremes, we might end up with nothing. How can we not cast a wider net? If the number is less than 2,000, there's no point in working with us anymore. Ping Zhenyue retreated in order to advance, and she began to make hidden threats. According to Ping Zhenyue's calculations, there was a high chance that Yin Yang would not give in, and might even fly into a rage. However, as long as she took a step back and reduced the number of disciples to 800, Yin Yang would be able to save his face. When he was in a good mood, he might even agree. Even if Yin Yang still did not agree, she could just let him decide the number. Anyway, it had already reached 400, which was very close to her target. She believed that the final number would be higher than this number. Even if it was 400 people, it would be enough. However, as soon as she said 2,000, she saw Yin Yang frown and actually fall into deep thought. The eyes of all the Phoenix Cry sect's higher-ups lit up. There's a way. This chapter has 5,000 words. I wish everyone a happy Lantern Festival. I've received feedback that one chapter a day is too little. Even if one chapter has 8,000 words, it would be better to split it into 2 chapters with 2,000 words each. After all, one chapter is not as much as 2 chapters. It's hard for me to understand the truth. Most of the brothers who had followed Feng Ling for more than 10 years wouldn't be calculative about this. They especially wouldn't be calculative about the number of chapters with me. After so many years of working with each other, we already knew about this. However, now that there was such a comment, I didn't know if I was happy or sad. Ha ha ha. Chapter 1194. Today was his mother's birthday, and he drank a little too much, so he took the day off. Cough cough. Actually, he had some time to write in the afternoon, but he slacked off. It was his mother's birthday, so he had an excuse. He took the day off. I am the Supreme. Today was his mother's birthday, so he took the day off. Currently typing, please wait a moment. After the content has been updated, please refresh the page to receive the latest update. Chapter 1195. Including Gan Tianyan, the number of Phoenix Cry sect's higher-ups was not high. They dared not have high expectations. After all, They were the sect's disciples. Even if they were to give up 100, it would be a great favor. The quality of the disciples was already far higher than the standard of the disciples that Phoenix Cry sect could recruit in each generation. Most of them were extremely satisfied with the 400 people that Ping Jinhua had achieved. 400 people. Even if there were 20 people stationed here, each person could get 20 disciples. What was the concept of 20 gifted disciples? How many disciples did they have in the Phoenix Cry sect's headquarters? The most were 20 to 30, and the least were only 5 to 6. Furthermore, their talents were far inferior to these disciples in front of them. But now there were 20 of them at once. This was really good, very good. Everyone could even sense that their sect leader was putting on a strong front. The 2000 ultimatum was just a tactic to make a retreat. Throughout the entire process, the person who was most afraid of the failure of this collaboration was Phoenix Cry sect's leader, Ping Jinhua. What he did not expect was that Yin Yang actually seemed to be considering it seriously. Could it be that there was hope for such an exorbitant number? It was a crucial moment. Everyone present held their breaths. The entire room was so silent that even a pin drop could be heard. Yin Yang seemed to be thinking hard for a long time, sweat beading on his forehead. He said slowly, 2000, it's not impossible. But if it's 2000, we have to pick first. Ping Jinhua felt an inexplicable joy rush to her scalp. She could not help but take a deep breath, but she could not relax now. This was the most crucial moment. Ping Jinhua pressed on, her attitude becoming more and more unyielding. Sect leader Yin, you must be joking. If you pick first, what's the point of our collaboration? You've already picked the best geniuses, so what are we left to choose? If so, why don't we call off this collaboration? Her words were overbearing, each one striking to the heart. In the eyes of the Phoenix Cry sect's people, Yin Yang's consideration was even more difficult. He could not decide for a long time, tapping his fingers lightly on the table with a frown. In the eyes of those from the Phoenix Cry sect, Yin Yang's consideration was even more difficult. He could not make up his mind for a long time, tapping his fingers on the table with a frown. If I can't pick first. Yin Yang's gaze was unprecedentedly solemn as he hesitated. Ping Jinyua's eyes lit up. After all, he's just a youngster. How could he be a match for a veteran like me? If you hesitate, it means that you have a guilty conscience. Then I will add fuel to the fire. This is the struggle for the inheritance. There is no room for soft-heartedness. Sect leader Yin, our current cooperation model can be said to be even more stable than an alliance. If we become unhappy over such a small amount, I think I will be very regretful. What do you think, sect leader Yin? Ping Jinyua said indifferently. Actually, his voice had already started to tremble. He shouted in his heart, 2000, 2000, 2000 geniuses. He was about to get it. Oh my goodness. Our Phoenix Cry sect is about to rise. A mere first place with a middle-grade celestial luck banner is no longer worthy of my attention. We will aim our swords at the high-grade celestial luck banner, or even higher. The other elders of the Phoenix Cry sect also had enthusiastic looks in their eyes. Each and every one of them put their hands under the table, and were already sweating. They were so satisfied. I'm so satisfied. Sect leader, you have to take it easy. Don't push him too far. He's just a little kid. If the other party were to become anxious, fly into a rage out of humiliation, and directly turn hostile, then it would be like drawing water with a sieve. Under everyone's gaze, Yin Yang suddenly relaxed, as if he had lost all his strength. He said listlessly, Sect leader Ping, you're amazing. 2000, let's do it this way. Ow. An elder of the Phoenix Cry sect could not help but feel a surge of emotion. He lost his composure and jumped up. Then, he immediately came to his senses and sat down. His face was full of seriousness again, as if what the others had seen just now was just an illusion. However, his face was getting redder and redder. His fellow disciples looked at him fiercely. Idiot! You're going to ruin everything. Fortunately, sect leader Yin did not seem to care about these minor details. He said dejectedly, but if this is the number, even if we can't choose first, you can't choose first either. What do you mean, sect leader Yin? Ping Junhua suppressed the ecstasy in her heart. There are a total of 4,000 disciples who haven't been recruited yet. They're divided into 28 teams. We'll gather them now and draw lots to decide. Yunyang said. You can only choose 4 of the teams as you wish. Those 4 teams will belong to those 4 teams. You're not allowed to pick the other teams. Yunyang said. This is my bottom line. I won't give in anymore. Looking at Yunyang's determined gaze, Ping Junhua knew that he had already reached his limit. If there was any more pressure, he would probably fight back to his limit. The result of fighting back to his limit would not only cause this cooperation to fail, it might even cause both parties to turn against each other. All right, let's do that. Ping Junhua agreed readily. Sect leader Yun, let's clap our hands as a vow. Clap, clap, clap. After 3 claps, the matter was settled. The Phoenix Cry sect's disciples cheered thunderously. Yunyang looked dejected. Sect leader Ping, the older the wiser. This junior is impressed. He chuckled bitterly. I know that 2,000 is still too much, but, sect leader Ping, your negotiation skills are really. Sigh. That's enough, I admit defeat. Ping Junhua smiled proudly. It's just that sect leader Yin is generous, and has given me some leeway. I thank you here. Now the matter between both parties was settled. Yunyang sent Luo Dajiang and the others to lead the Phoenix Cry sect's disciples to their lodgings and stay there. Of course, he could not arrange the lodgings himself. That was a logistical matter. If he did everything himself, it would be overly solicitous and demeaning. This matter should have been handled by Qian Duo. But with Luo Dajiang, the Phoenix Cry sect's son-in-law, it was naturally more appropriate. Just as the Phoenix Cry sect's disciples were led out by Luo Dajiang, the remaining 8 members of the Demiurge Flawed 10, other than Shi Wuchen and Luo Dajiang, stared at Yunyang in confusion. Their gazes were almost spitting fire. Boss, tell us quickly what's going on. What right does the Phoenix Cry sect have to take away 2,000 of our disciples? How could you agree to it? It's not appropriate, is it? Obviously, the brothers did not agree with Yin Yang's decision, and were reluctant to do so. They had worked so hard, and did not even know when they had recruited so many talented disciples. Many of them had only just learned that the residents of 9 Supremes had so many talented disciples, but 2,000 of the 14,000 people who could dazzle anyone's eyes had been given to the Phoenix Cry sect all of a sudden. No matter how they looked at it, this result was too much of a pity and a great loss. Even if there was a so-called cooperation, even if there was a beautiful original intention, and even if there was a so-called consideration for the many disciples who did not want to delay their talents, these reasons were all untenable when analyzed in detail. They were all one-sided wishful thinking and inappropriate timing. How could Yunyang, who usually looked very smart, be so ignorant before such a major event, especially when he was intimidated by Ping Junhua just now? The anger in everyone's heart was rising, and they almost exploded. What kind of cooperation is this? We can't see any tangible benefits here at all, understand? Yunyang chuckled and said, Brothers, don't be anxious. The residence of 9 Supremes has only just been established, and we urgently need your sects to join us. First, we made a deal with the General Commerce League, and now we're working with the Phoenix Cry sect. At least in the short term, we don't have to worry. The main purpose of this compromise is to buy time for our development. Yunyang said seriously, because what we lack the most is time, brothers. We seem to have the middle-class celestial luck banner and become famous overnight, but our real foundation is far from enough, and our foundation is not stable. In the previous battle for the celestial luck banner, we've made too many enemies. It's really difficult to move forward, and we're surrounded by enemies everywhere, to the point where we're constantly worried about our sect's safety. Now, however, with a large number of Phoenix Cry sect experts coming to our sect, it's no different than our ability increasing several times out of thin air. Lan Ruojuan nodded, but he did not look worried as he said, What boss said makes sense. What you've said is all about our sect's current shortcomings. These are undeniable, but even if our sect's foundation is not solid, we only need to work hard to strengthen it. As long as we don't provoke a strong enemy, with the defensive power of our sect, we should be able to defend ourselves, even if the sects with the middle-class celestial luck banner come to attack us. However, isn't the so-called cooperation with the Phoenix Cry sect too wasteful to send out 2,000 talented and excellent disciples at once? Yin Yang chuckled again when he heard that. Ruojuan, what you said makes sense, but it's a little too much. While our school's defensive formation is powerful enough to withstand the attack of a sect with a middle-class celestial luck banner, it can only withstand it, not be a match for it. What if there are really sects that are shameless enough to drag it out with us? What should we do then? Other than establishing a friendly relationship, I've chosen to cooperate with the Phoenix Cry sect, because I intend to use their manpower to strengthen the sect's foundation. Since I want to use their manpower, how can I do it without paying a corresponding price? 2,000 disciples may seem like a large number, but we have a total of 14,000 excellent disciples. It's definitely worth it to use that number to exchange for an ally and help like the Phoenix Cry sect. Seeing that everyone was still indignant, Yin Yang wanted to say something but stopped. After a pause, he continued. Besides, these 2,000 disciples, we're only handing them over to teach them. At least in name, they're still disciples of the residents of 9 Supremes. How many do you think will follow them 10 years later? If you start worrying now, you'll have to worry about it 10 years later. Listening to Yin Yang's words, the faces of the brothers gradually turned thoughtful. It was true that their boss was right. Although this would mean giving up a lot of talented disciples, the residents of 9 Supremes would also gain safe time for rapid development. Most importantly, as Yin Yang had said, the Phoenix Cry sect had indeed obtained the teaching rights of 2,000 disciples, but those who would ultimately choose to follow them might not necessarily be 2,000. It was destined to be less than this number. Tai Ching-sung, Ping Xiaoyi, Guanuanyang, Shi Bujia, and Ren Qingquang looked thoughtful and nodded in agreement. Boss is right. In spite of this, Lan Ruojuan, Wu Minghuan, and Kong Luoyue still felt that there was something odd about the whole thing. The three of them were more flexible than the others, feeling that there must be another meaning behind their boss' action. After some thought, Kong Luoyue was the first to understand, and could not help chuckling. Following his laugh, Lan Ruojuan and Wu Minghuan understood as well. The three of them grinned at Tai Ching-sung, and the others who were still nodding in agreement and said in unison, "You fools, aren't you ashamed to be teachers?" Tai Ching-sung and the others were infuriated, rolling up their sleeves and getting ready to fight. Just as the clamor was about to rise, Yin Yang coughed and said, "I wonder how improper it is for all of you to be so loud when there are guests here. Where is your demeanor as teachers?" Lan Ruojuan, Wu Minghuan, and the others understood at once and blinked in understanding. "Boss, we'll save it, we'll save it." Tai Ching-sung frowned and chided them. "What do you know? Don't think that your father doesn't know that you're all up to no good. We're smart enough to understand you," Kong Luoyue said disdainfully. As his words trailed off, the three of them turned and left together. Tai Ching-sung grew even more infuriated. He chased after them with the others, and grabbed Kong Luoyue fiercely. "You bastards! If you don't make it clear, don't blame us for bullying you with numbers and maiming you." Kong Luoyue snorted. His eyes flickered, but he spoke to Tai Ching-sung through telepathy. "You really don't know anything. Boss has set a 10-year deadline, and you still don't understand? That's a whole decade." Tai Ching-sung was still at a loss and said in surprise, 10 years? So what if it's 10 years? Kong Luoyue rolled his eyes and said breathlessly, "I've made it so clear, but you still don't understand? Why don't you die of stupidity? 10 years. Isn't it just 10 seasons?" Tai Ching-sung thought about it in a daze, and became more and more confused. Suddenly he flew into a rage. "What are you trying to say? Can't you be more straightforward?" "Idiot!" Kong Luoyue scolded him through telepathy. "Let me ask you, how many years has Phoenix Cry sect been established?" Phoenix Cry sect is a famous sect in the Bound of Universe, so it should have been established for thousands, or even tens of thousands of years, right? Tai Ching-sung answered with some uncertainty. "It's a famous sect, but after thousands or tens of thousands of years, it has only stopped at mid-grade, right?" "Nonsense. If it's not mid-grade, can it be upper grade? Tai Ching-song looked at Kong Luoyue with disdain. I doubt your intelligence. Are you stupid? Are you muddle-headed? Did you pour a bellyful of bad ideas into your head? Kong Luoyue almost choked to death on the breath he was holding. I can't believe Tai Ching-song scolded me for having a low IQ. This was simply unbearable, unbearable, unbearable. For a moment, he did not know what to say. Calling you an idiot is to beautify you. You're an idiot, a coward, and a villain, Kong Luoyue said through gritted teeth. Phoenix Cry sect has been established for a long time, but it's still a mid-grade sect after so many years. On the other hand, Residence of Nine Supremes has risen to the level of mid-grade in less than 2 years. Don't you understand the difference? Boss has said that what we lack now is time. What time do you think it is? During the 10 years that Phoenix Cry sect has been in Residence of Nine Supremes, there have been 3 Celestial Luck banners. According to the speed of Residence of Nine Supremes development, we can be promoted to an upper-grade sect in these 10 years, can't we? In fact, it's not entirely impossible to go one step further and become a palace sect, alright? Kong Luoyue roared through telepathy. Boss's idea seems absurd, but it's actually feasible. At least, I'm full of confidence and fighting spirit. Now, use your brain that's filled with water and think about it. 10 years later, when the disciples make their own choice, if it were you, would you choose the Sacred Heart Palace, the Supreme Existence, or the Residence of Nine Supremes, a middle-class sect? Tai Ching-song said with a chuckle. Me? Of course I'll choose the Residence of Nine Supremes. No matter how good the Sacred Heart Palace is, I don't care. Kong Luoyue covered his face and sobbed. I've been defeated by Yu Ching-song. Ridiculous. Tai Ching-song's tower-like burly body turned and left, shaking his head as he walked. I can't believe you're testing my loyalty with such a simple question. Humph. He swaggered off. Kong Luoyue grabbed his hair in agony and shouted hoarsely. Tai Ching-song, you don't deserve to be listed among the Demiurge Flawed 10 with your IQ. On the other side, Lan Ruojuan frowned and kept thinking. This is still not right. Boss should have other intentions, they might not be so simple. But what else is there? In that case, don't leave a single one of you behind. Ping Jingyue gritted her teeth and said, there are 24 of us in total. If we split the 2,000 disciples, each of us could get at least 80 or 90 people. But now, hearing Ping Jinyue's words, everyone lowered their heads and pouted. 24 people, yes, of course it's 24 people. I knew that the sect leader would also have a share. If these disciples are divided equally among 12 people, then each person will be teaching close to 200 disciples. Ping Jinyue said, no one should think about staying here permanently. We have 24 people, and we'll split into 2 shifts. Each of us will recruit disciples that we like, and we'll form groups of 2. When one of us is not around, the other will be responsible for teaching. We'll rotate every half a year. That's settled, I'll make the decision. When the elders heard this, they were originally unwilling. However, after thinking about it carefully, their expressions became thoughtful. If they could not stay here permanently, then this idea was already the best choice. No one would be able to reap all the benefits alone, but no one would be left behind either. I think this idea is feasible. An elder was the first to express his agreement. This elder was considered the weaker one in the fight just now. He had long been apprehensive, afraid that he would not be able to win against the others. Naturally, he was the first to agree now. At least, this result was much better than getting nothing. I agree as well. This is a great idea, sect leader. Gan Tianyan was the second to express her agreement. She and Ping Jinyue were disciples of the same master. Both of them had the same thoughts, and there were no grudges between them. Gan Tianyan was especially proud of her unique identity. In terms of the Residence of Nine Supremes, she had a far greater advantage than the other disciples. Now that she was supporting her sect leader and senior sister, she naturally had to do it. Everyone agreed immediately. There was no way they could disagree. If they continued arguing, they might really end up in a fight. That would really be a joke. Alright, let's form the teams now and draw lots. Those who draw lots will stay. As for the rest, leave as soon as you're done. You're not allowed to stay for even a moment longer. Ping Jinyue announced seriously. All the elders agreed with a pout. She was indeed the sect leader. She scolded everyone with her righteous words. But she did not leave behind any of the benefits that belonged to her. Gan Tianyin and Ping Jinyue naturally formed a team. The others also formed their own teams and began to draw lots. Then, of course, 12 of them beamed with joy and cursed under their breaths. Gan Tianyin was of course the first to stay. In fact, even if Gan Tianyin had not been qualified and only Ping Jinyue had drawn lots, she would have let Gan Tianyin be the first to stay. After all, she was the sect leader, and she needed to stay in the first stage to take charge. The future of Phoenix Christ sect depends on all of you. Ping Jinyue instructed solemnly. White-bearded elderly narrowed his eyes and said, Sect leader, this matter of drawing lots for disciples should be carried out as soon as possible. My deific consciousness has been covering the residence of 9 Supremes just now. The residence of 9 Supremes has kept its promise and has not done anything. However, the hearts of men are not what they used to be. If they have other thoughts and make a move behind our backs, it will be very disadvantageous to us. Everyone nodded. Although these words were said with the heart of a villain, no one in Phoenix Christ sect objected to it, since they were desperate for talented disciples. So be it if he had the heart of a villain. We don't have such a source of students. An hour later, Yun Yang and the other higher-ups of the residence of 9 Supremes gathered together with the higher-ups of Phoenix Christ sect. On the plaza, 28 teams were neatly arranged into 28 square teams, which were gathered in front of them. The residents of 9 Supremes in Phoenix Christ sect will recruit disciples today. Disciples, it's time to decide your fate. Yin Yang first comforted them out of habit. If you're lucky enough to be chosen by Phoenix Christ sect, you'll have 10 years to cultivate Phoenix Christ sect's cultivation method. After 10 years, you'll have another chance to represent your sect if your cultivation base is successful. Yun Yang explained everything in detail. It was not until Yun Yang finished that the commotion among the disciples subsided. Then Ping Jinyue began to draw lots. 3rd, 7th, 15th, and 23rd. Step forward. As far as the eye could see, all he could see was the disappointment on the faces of the 4 large groups of disciples, and they did not conceal it at all. How unlucky! How could I be chosen by Phoenix Christ sect? How unlucky! In the future, everyone will still learn in the residence of 9 Supremes, but the teachers of each sect will only be responsible for their own disciples. Yun Yang announced according to the previous agreement. However, the disciples of the 2 sects will still follow the inherent competition mechanism of the residence of 9 Supremes. From today onwards, there will be an arena for the disciples of each sect. At the same time, the corresponding reward and punishment rules will be set. Disciples can challenge each other, or apply to be the ring master based on their own strength. The winner will be rewarded, and those who succeed in defending the arena will also be rewarded. I hope that the disciples of the residence of 9 Supremes won't lose to others. Yin Yang's words lit up the eyes of the 10,000 disciples present, their eyes sparkling brightly. Even the higher-ups of the Phoenix Christ sect brightened when they heard this. This was a good idea. The competition between the disciples of the 2 sects would not only promote their enthusiasm for cultivation, but it might also cause some hostility between the disciples of the 2 sections. In that case, the disciples who cultivated Phoenix Christ sect's cultivation method should be given an additional 30%. Good idea. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, 3 arenas in a triangular shape suddenly rose from the ground and stood majestically in front of them. Arenas for the strong, arenas for the challenge, arenas for the 2 sects. There were 3 arenas in total. They seemed to be repetitive and cumbersome, but in fact, each had its own purpose. In fact, they were not repetitive and were not cumbersome. All the disciples were eager to try, and the teachers of the residence of 9 Supremes were also confident. Of course, the higher-ups of the Phoenix Christ sect were also proud and conceited. Everyone felt that only their own disciples could stand out from the crowd, and stand out from the crowd. These arenas would definitely become the catalysts for the growth of their disciples. The elders of the Phoenix Cry sect returned to their courtyards with satisfaction, with the 2,000 disciples. All of them were so happy that their mouths were crooked. The residents of Nine Supremes did not cheat. There were at least hundreds of top-notch geniuses among them. The others who were slightly less qualified were also the best of the best. Such a high-quality disciple, and such a large number of them, was something that the Phoenix Cry sect had never seen in the tens of thousands of years since its founding. This time, they were really going to be rich. Ping Zhenyue did not follow the main group of the Phoenix Cry sect back to the station. Instead, she pulled Yun Yang aside for a discussion. Sect leader Yin, let's discuss something. Please speak, sect leader Ping. The last batch of disciples is the one with more than 100 people. In that group, there is a little girl with the spirit phoenix physique. That is our sect's highest cultivation method. The most suitable physique for cultivation. Ping Zhenyue wore an expression that said, "You have to give it to me," and said, "Please give it to me, sect leader Yun." Yun Yang was speechless. "I suspect, but I also believe, that you have long planned to take advantage of this, haven't you? Why didn't you say so earlier? Why did you only ask for it after the selection was over? What should I do then? Can I not give it to you? Sect leader Ping." Yun Yang looked constipated. "You hurt me very much. You're really unbefitting of the leader of a sect with a middle-class celestial luck banner." Ping Zhenyue smiled embarrassedly. "I was indeed playing a trick on you this time, but I believe that you are a magnanimous person, and will not lower yourself to the level of a woman like me. Well, for the sake of the sect's heritage, the leader of a sect with a middle-class celestial luck banner has admitted that she is a woman. Even if you have a grudge and are unwilling, what can you say?" Sure. Yun Yang agreed with a bitter smile. "Thank you." Ping Zhenyue was overjoyed. Pride was something that could be forsaken when necessary, and the gains would still be quite plentiful. As long as he could obtain a sincere disciple with the spirit wind physique, what was a mere pride? That's all for today. I just arrived in Beijing with my wife, and I'll go to the traditional Chinese medicine hospital tomorrow. His wife would rather die than have surgery for her lump, so she could only treat it with traditional Chinese medicine first. Fortunately, she had been taking traditional Chinese medicine for 2 months, and it was effective. Now she was taking the 4th month. Tomorrow, she would go to the hospital to have her dressing changed. I also took the opportunity to register and have a look. AmpGT. I have to work hard and look forward to the day I return to the residence of Nine Supremes. Me too. I'm a member of the residence of Nine Supremes when I'm alive, and I'll be a member of the residence of Nine Supremes when I die. I'll never forget the sect and betray it. The group of little fellows tilted their heads, twisted their necks and pouted their lips. Their eyes were red, and there were even tears glistening in their eyes. Their expressions could only be described by words like bitter hatred and irreconcilable hatred, and they did not even try to hide it. This was the most infuriating thing. When it was time to count the names, they even twisted their necks and pouted their lips, pretending that they did not hear anything, causing the people of the Phoenix Cry sect a headache. Fortunately, the people of the Phoenix Cry sect were all experienced martial artists. Their experience and knowledge were top-notch, and because of Gan Tianyan, they knew some of these children's thoughts very well. They understood that they could not rush things, and that only a long time could bridge the gap between them bit by bit. After much effort, they finally managed to coax these little fellows to register in the name list, and they were given new names according to the seniority of the Phoenix Cry sect. It was fortunate that the people of the Phoenix Cry sect were so patient that in order to please these little fellows, they made the names of the little fellows grand and grand. The original names of Erhe, San Niu Wu Lung, Gosheng became Cheng Yun, Lingbo Ling Xiao, Zhuangji. Either it was meaningful, pleasant to the ear, ambitious, majestic and mighty, or full of the aura of an immortal. It was already very difficult for the higher-ups of the Phoenix Cry sect to come up with these names. They really put in a lot of effort, spared no effort, racked their brains and searched their guts. I'm not very knowledgeable in my life, but I've suffered because I'm not cultured. Now, I actually have to rack my brain to give these little brats nice names," the first elder said with tears and snot. "My original name was Lee Ergo. No one gave me another name." This sentence, no matter when, would have caused everyone to burst into laughter. However, after everyone had been busy for a few days, no one could laugh. They all felt the same way. Everyone had the same heart, and their hearts were the same. How could there be any difference? At this time and place, there were a total of 24 masters and 2,001 disciples. Each of the 23 elders was assigned 80 disciples, and the rest all belonged to the sect leader. This distribution should have been a happy result for everyone. However, in view of the children's unwillingness to cooperate, their hearts were not on the same page, and their faces were not on the same page. Even Ping Zhenyue was helpless against this. She even felt depressed. The child with the spirit phoenix physique had already started to hate her, and it was a hatred that could not be any greater. After all, in the child's mind, he had already escaped the selection. What right did an old woman like her have to forcefully take him over? What did she want to do? Did she consider the feelings of the person involved? The others were just unlucky, but was he the unluckiest? The Phoenix Cry sect deliberately welcomed the new disciples with a policy of conciliation. But in front of this group of little things, they had no room to resist at all. They retreated step by step and suffered a great loss. This was mostly decided by the disciples' backgrounds. The disciples that the Phoenix Cry sect had recruited in the past were basically from well-off families. Due to their extraordinary talents, they had been coaxed by their parents and elders since they were young. Naturally, they had accepted the policy of appeasement from a higher class very well and thoroughly. However, what kind of people were these little brats that Yin Yang had recruited? They were all people who had been tortured to death by human traffickers in the most difficult and cruel environment. They were the most sensitive and vigilant little brats. Appeasement? There must be an ulterior motive. If it was something else, the people of the Phoenix Cry sect would still have room to argue. But when it came to ulterior motives, they had to pinch their noses and admit it. It was not that they could not recruit disciples themselves, but they coveted the disciples' talents. They could not bear to see the residents of 9 Supremes, which did not have enough teachers, delay the future of many disciples. But it was just a pretentious excuse. This was an indisputable fact. It was indisputable. If they tried to defend themselves, they would only expose their own shortcomings and add to the ridicule. After struggling for a few days, there was basically no progress. Fortunately, the people of the Phoenix Cry sect were all experienced people, and they had long expected this situation. They had already made plans for a long time. Only Ping Zhenyue decided that she could not stay any longer. According to the previous decision, 12 people will stay behind to watch over the disciples' cultivation. Take it slowly. We have a whole 10 years. There's no hurry. Ping Zhenyue said. People's hearts are made of flesh. There are no disciples who can't be taught well, and there are no hearts that can't be warmed. It all depends on whether the master is dutiful or not. Even a stone will be warmed one day. After that, she left the room. The 12 people who stayed looked at each other, but all of their faces were pale, and they were no longer in high spirits. Everyone could speak the truth, and everyone could change their tricks, but they were all different in their ingenuity. However, when it came down to the root, it was still the most difficult and the most difficult time. Gon Tianyin coughed and said, Senior Brotherly, these 2,000 disciples are all geniuses among geniuses. Thank you for your trouble. Senior Brotherly shook his head and said, Junior Sister Gon, these are the seed disciples, the geniuses among geniuses. It is already a great blessing for me to be able to watch and witness them with my own eyes. Besides, I'm not the disciple of the sect leader, so how can I overstep my authority? I really can't bear this responsibility. Gon Tianyin's eyes widened and she said, What did you say? You can't bear it? Why do I remember that you had solemnly vowed that you would groom a few outstanding successors, and that you would have no regrets for the rest of your life? Now you're saying this. Are you backing out? Unfortunately, it's too late. Even if I can't, I have to do it. Anyway, I'm only in charge of the 200 disciples in my branch. All of you will have to teach them yourselves. Didn't you all fight to stay? Didn't you think of what you should stay for? If you don't work hard to teach the disciples, are you really going to retire here? After saying this stiffly, she raised her head and walked out. Senior Brotherly sighed and said, Look at this temper. Luckily, I didn't marry. Before he finished speaking, a beam of light flew in from outside. Senior Apprentice Brotherly let out a strange cry and hurriedly dodged. He was shocked to see a sword stuck under his feet. Gan Tianyan's voice came from outside. If you dare to talk nonsense again, I will cut you into pieces. Do you think I won't dare? Everyone looked at each other, and then burst into laughter. The laughter lasted for a long time, sweeping away the previous oppressive atmosphere. A woman said, Senior Brotherly, you have to be honest. Back then, Senior Sister Gan didn't even look at you. Of course, it's mainly because you were really ugly when you were young. I remember that I didn't really look at you. But once I did, I really couldn't eat. Now that I think about it, I still have a lingering fear. Senior Brotherly was speechless. In any case, the cooperation between the two sects had come to an end for the time being. The 10 peak-level Saint Kings and 2 Saint Emperors of the Phoenix Cry sect stayed in the residence of 9 Supremes. The disciples of the 2 great sects also began to cultivate step by step. No matter how reluctant the disciples in the Phoenix Cry sect were, their desire to become stronger would not change. Although everyone's little face was frowning and full of bitterness and hatred, they did not slack off in their cultivation, and their progress was extraordinary. This comforted the people of the Phoenix Cry sect, and made them feel that this trip was not in vain. The disciples of the residence of 9 Supremes said, Cultivate as hard as you can. The 2 sects have a martial competition every month. If you go up there and embarrass yourself, do you really have the nerve to do that? The disciples of the Phoenix Cry sect were trying to appease them. Our sect's cultivation method is easy to learn but hard to master. Don't be too anxious in the beginning. Just do it step by step. Don't be discouraged, even if you're not as good as others for the time being. Now is the time to build the foundation. Your current progress is already very fast. It was obvious that the cultivation methods of the 2 sects were completely different, almost opposite to each other. Nevertheless, at least on the surface, they were already on the right track. On this very morning, Yun Yang and Dong Qitian left the residence of 9 Supremes quietly. They soared into the sky and disappeared in the blink of an eye. I'll be taking the high-speed train home tomorrow morning. Sister Feng is fine, but I was shocked by the old Chinese doctor. The old man said that my stomach is already 50 years old. F***CK. He prescribed a bunch of Chinese medicine to nourish the stomach, and brewed it himself. Then, a bunch of guys said that I made up a lie to ask for leave again. So I showed them the prescription. In the end, after you guys saw the prescription, King recognized the epimedium at the end of the prescription. Now all the King Qidian are saying that my kidneys are bad. A few authors called me and asked, Fengling, I heard that you're done for? To the person who called me I said, F***CK your grandpa. That prescription is good for the stomach. It was good for the stomach. It was good for the stomach. F***CK. Amp. GT. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support. And don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.